Chapter 155. Jun John Tian and Jun Wui didn't know that the matter with Fatty Tang was just a child's play. Not only was the root cause of this matter Jun Moxie had been involved, but everything that had happened in the capital over the past few months, including the explosion of the imperial tutor Li's Dan Tian, the visit of the imperial tutor, and the visit of the imperial tutor had led to Tianxiang City becoming a place where gold Xian Yuxian was rarely seen in the past. Earth Xian experts, Tian Xian experts, and Shun Xian have been guarding the city from the shadows. All of these strange situations have been traced back to this innocent and smiling brat. This matter ends here. It must not be leaked. Grandpa Jun was, after all, a shrewd and astute person. That old bastard Tang, Wanli, is probably half crazy right now. His eyes are green with greed, and he wants to find someone to cause trouble for him. Just keep this matter to yourself. As long as that fatty Tang Yuan doesn't say anything, just pretend that nothing happened. At this point, Jun John Tian sighed and said, "Fortunately, it was Tang Wan Li's grandson. If it was someone else's grandson, I'm afraid he would have been killed by Zhu on the spot. Emos, yeah, this is a very dangerous thing to do, let alone old eunuch Zhu. Even old man Tang might not be willing to let this matter rest if it were to be known by others." What do you mean by that? Could it be that Tang Wanli's grandson was special? Although Fatty and I weren't sincere in our actions, it was just a mischievous act by the younger generation. It shouldn't be that serious, right? Could there be some hidden story behind this? Jun Moxie really didn't understand. Although old eunuch Zhu was an expert of Tian Xian and had an extraordinary status in the palace, he shouldn't have gone so far. That Zhu is not just an ordinary eunuch. Emos, yeah, I know that you have improved a lot recently. However, you still need to be more cautious in your actions in the future. It is better to be safe than sorry, Grandpa Jun said earnestly. Grandpa, Emos also knows that old eunuch Zhu is a Tian Xian expert, but he is still a eunuch. You won't tell me that he was originally a great general, right? Jun Daxiao said disdainfully. Hitman Jun looked down on those who willingly mutilated themselves to enter the palace as slaves. Emos, yeah, this is really your fault. How could you have known that Zhu was not just a general in the past? His position in the Tianxiang Empire's army was only below that of old Dugu and me. Only 2 or 3 other people could compare to him. It's just that fate makes a fool out of us. The old man sighed with emotion. Could it be? At this time, Jun Wui interrupted. Father, you said that old eunuch Zhu. Could it be that he is actually the great general Zhu Songlong who was as famous as you in Dugazongheng? But didn't he die in battle? Grandpa Jun shook his head. Other than His Majesty, this old man, Tang Wanli, and a few others, no one else knows about this secret. Back when His Majesty was still the crown prince, he and Zhu Songlong led the army into battle. This old man led the right army, and Dugazongheng led the left army. At that time, Tianxiang was only a small country in its embryonic form. During that battle, the central army was ambushed, and we were unable to rescue them in time. The crown prince, together with 2 generals, Tang Wanli and Zhu Songlong, were captured. The enemy was determined to humiliate the crown prince and destroy the morale of our army. At that time, Zhu Songlong was handsome, so he pretended to be the crown prince and was imprisoned in the Carrion River. Carrion Stream? Jun Wui and Jun Moxie looked at each other and understood. Just from a name, one could imagine what kind of place that was. This old man rushed hundreds of miles to rescue the crown prince and fought to the death with the enemy. At the last moment, they used Zhu Songlong to threaten me. At that time, Zhu Songlong's body was no longer in human shape. The Carrion Stream is filled with poisonous insects, snakes, and rats. When he entered, he had already suffered from serious injuries. Moreover, his xianqi was sealed. His entire body was bitten by tens of thousands of poisonous insects. Even his crotch area was in a mess, a pity for a great general. Just like that, Grandpa Jun sighed in melancholy. So that's how it is. No wonder such an expert was a eunuch. No wonder he had such a serious obsession with cleanliness. Jun Moxie finally understood. No wonder eunuch Zhu was so favored in the palace. If it wasn't for him, then His Majesty the Emperor would have been the one to bear all of this. Jun Moxie couldn't help but regret that he had insulted this respectable general. This was another part of the hitman Jun's charm. He would admit his mistakes if he was wrong. Of course, he would only admit his mistakes in his heart. His mouth would still be a dead duck's mouth. In the end, our side fought back and won a great victory. But Zhu Songlong was completely disheartened. Moreover, he was injured and sick. His appearance was haggard, and he no longer had the courage to live. For the next few days, he refused medical treatment. He didn't eat or drink. He was determined to die. Tang Wanli was with him at that time. He said, "You saved my life. If you don't live, then I won't live either." So he went on a hunger strike. For the first 3 days, Zhu Songlong was indifferent. He was on the verge of death. Tang Wanli held a knife in front of him. He cut off pieces of his own flesh. He said, "If you continue to be like this, then I will cut myself into a skeleton in front of you. That way, I won't be able to bear seeing you die first." Jun Wui and Jun Moxie looked at each other. Their hearts were filled with horror. Recalling the tragic atmosphere at that time, they could not help but feel their souls throbbing. They remembered the high righteousness of those old men. They were even more fascinated, until Tang Wanli cut himself 33 times. He cut off 33 pieces of his flesh. Zhu Songlong suddenly burst into tears. From then on, he began to eat and drink. Tang Wanli collapsed. His injuries were much more serious than Zhu Songlong's. Junjian Tian sighed. After the war, the crown prince ascended the throne. Tang Wanli was conferred the title of nobility. Zhu Songlong refused. He voluntarily entered the palace and changed his name to Zhu to protect His Majesty's safety. Until now. So the army had one more General Zhu Songlong, who sacrificed his life for the country. And the palace had one more chief, Zhu. To this day, the descendants of the Zhu family do not know that Zhu is Zhu Songlong. The change in appearance is too great. The room became silent as he finished narrating this secret. Even after so many years, Grandpa Jun was still able to slowly tell the story of the iron blood friendship between the senior heroes. It was still so soul-stirring. No wonder Grandpa Jun said that if he was not Tang Wanli's grandson, he would have been killed. So that's how it is. No wonder. Just as Grandpa Jun finished speaking, a servant came in to report. All the Tang family's female soldiers had arrived at the Jun family's main gate with the severely injured and half-dead Tang Yuan, and were requesting an audience with Grandpa Jun. Grandpa Jun's scalp went numb. Could it be that my grandson has been exposed? They have come looking for me. With a perturbed heart, he came out to find out that Tang Yuan had been expelled from the Tang residence. However, his grandmother, mother, youngest aunt, and the other aunts were still worried. So after a discussion, and under Fatty Tang's own request, they unanimously decided to temporarily stay at the Jun residence. The group of women were originally afraid that Grandpa Jun would not accept Fatty. After all, Fatty's unfilial reputation was there. With Grandpa Jun's character, it would be reasonable for him to refuse. Unexpectedly, Grandpa Jun nodded his head in agreement and sent Fatty and his personal maid to Jun Moxie's small courtyard to settle down. Feeling guilty, he thanked the female soldiers of the Tang family profusely and hurriedly slipped away. Cough, cough. This was all because of my grandson's rotten idea. Seeing that there was no one around him, Tang Yuan laid on the bed with a mournful face. He struggled to raise his head and speak. "Third young master, what did you do? You really killed me." His buttocks were nearly pierced through by Zhu's palm. It was estimated that in the next few months, this fellow could only lie on his stomach. You still said that it was an aphrodisiac? F***CK. That was an aphrodisiac. It was simply... Tang Yuan was full of energy. He gritted his teeth and looked ferocious. That was simply a laxative. F***CK. I felt that something was wrong the moment I entered the palace. I was barely able to control myself. Later on, that old eunuch used a wooden stick to mess with my chrysanthemum. F***CK. Brother, I couldn't control myself anymore. I spat it out. Stop it. June Moxie looked like he wanted to vomit blood. How could it be a laxative? How could I make a mistake when I made it myself? How could it be like this? I followed your instructions this morning and ate a bellyful before I went to the Imperial Palace. Then I ate that pill before I went to see the old eunuch Zhu. It's really strong. And then Tang Yuan struggled to raise his head and accuse June Emocia. He denounced with a tearful voice. What? June Moxie finally knew where the problem was. You ate breakfast this morning? Didn't I say it clearly yesterday? Didn't I tell you not to eat breakfast? Why did you still eat? Would it kill you to skip a meal? That was originally an aphrodisiac. It was more of a laxative than a laxative. Once there was something in your stomach, how could it be good? Tang Yuan was stunned. After being reminded, he immediately remembered. He immediately beat his chest and stamped his feet. So it was me who got it wrong. All right, this can be considered as fulfilling your wish. You've achieved your original goal. Isn't it just a slap? Is there a need to do this? June Moxie was very disdainful. According to my original plan, you should have suffered a slap too. But you shouldn't have suffered so badly. Now you've pooped all over his face, body, and mouth. Blarg. June Moxie retched. It's already good enough that you're not beaten to death. That's right, I was scared to death at that time. You don't know, that old eunuch was actually an expert from Tianxian. He wielded a sky-blue light sword and used his qi to control the sword. He easily stripped me naked but didn't hurt me at all. At that time, I couldn't control myself and thought that it was over. There must be no cure. But in the end, that old eunuch showed me mercy. I heard that it was because he was friends with my grandfather. If it was someone else, they would have been dead by now. Fatty Tang was somewhat proud of himself as he said this. Then, he heartlessly said, Grandpa has finally said that he's going to kick me out of the house. Fortunately, I've been prepared for this. I've saved up a lot of money over the years. Although it's not a lot, it's not a small amount either. This is called being prepared. He suddenly said nervously, Third young master, if you want to gamble, you're not allowed to steal my money. Times are different now. This is all I have. June Moxie was stunned. What's going on? So this guy doesn't have any reaction to being kicked out of the house. Fatty Tang winked. Third young master, what's wrong with you? We're all family. It's not like you don't know that I've been kicked out 3 times. Is there a need to be so surprised? I have to put on a show for the outsiders. June Moxie stared at him dumbfounded. Finally, his neck couldn't support his head anymore. His head free fell onto the coffee table and even bounced twice. Ahem, let's digress a little. After all, Fatty Tang is the first successor of the Tang family. It's impossible for him to just follow June Moxie around. Therefore, during this period of time, such a plot was arranged. Firstly, it's funny. Secondly, it can be considered as the establishment of the evil monarch's faction. Next, June Moxie will start to establish his own faction. Of course, there will be a lot of jokes. Whether it's a battle of wits or strength, it will be very enjoyable. Please rest assured, during this period of time, Fengling's updates have not been satisfactory. I apologize for this. After all, the results of this book are not bad. However, the better the results are, the more pressure there is. Fengling won't overestimate himself and say that it's a classic. However, Fengling can guarantee that every scene in the book is something that no one has seen before. At least, in a certain aspect, it's unexpected. Currently, we are also working hard in this direction. Of course, the environment of a different world may be similar. Brothers and sisters, please forgive and support me on this point. Chapter 156. Your whole family is this young master's disgusting image. A lifetime of disgusting image. June Moxie said with difficulty, and suddenly roared, Fatty Tang, I've taken you in today. If you can't build a business empire for me, I'll pull out all the fat in your body and use it as a sky lantern. Remember what I said today. This is what I was born to do. Tang Yuan raised his fat neck with great effort and said in a very proud manner, First, tell me your plan. I'll see if there's anything I can do to improve it. Then, I'll give you some pointers. Then, you can watch as this young master shows off his fists and feet. I'll see how all the gold and silver in the world fall into your hands. It's you in my arms. June Moxie corrected. You're not only responsible for making money for me, but you're also responsible for spending money for me. Otherwise, what's the use of making money? If you can't use it properly, even piling up a mountain of gold is useless." As he said that, he took out a few pieces of paper from his bosom. "I don't have time to talk to you. This is my plan. Take a look. I don't really understand these things. You claim to be an expert, so give me some advice, and we'll be doing this from now on." As he said that, he patted a certain vital part of Tang Yuan's body and walked out amidst Fatty Tang's pig-like screams and curses. Tang Yuan muttered disdainfully, "I've been doing business all my life, and you're the one who wrote a business plan for me to look at? This is F***king hilarious. Let me take a nap first, then I'll revise and teach you." He closed his eyes, stuffed the pieces of paper from Jun Moxie under his pillow, and fell into a deep sleep. It wasn't that Jun Moxie didn't like Fatty, but that young Master Jun was really busy, very, very busy. For the past 2 days, whether he was walking or sleeping, he'd been researching that strange yin-yang escape technique. The ability to become invisible at any time, anywhere, was simply a life-saving talisman. As long as I master this skill, who can do anything to me? Even if all the supreme martial artists in the world, Shun Xian, were to surround and attack me, I would become invisible with a single-hand seal. You bunch of stupid birds. How are you going to kill me if you can't see me? Therefore, Jun Moxie worked tirelessly and brought out his greatest enthusiasm to cultivate the yin-yang escape. In order to experience this technique, Jun Mo Xie had used up all the qi in his body more than 50 times in a single day. More than 50 times, he had emptied his body of qi and was completely exhausted. Even though the Hongjun Pagoda provided him with a strong supply of spiritual energy, but Jun Moxie's supply still couldn't meet the demand. He had to study the yin-yang escape technique every second, and the amount of spiritual energy needed to activate it was extremely large. Often, in less than 2 practice sessions, Jun Moxie's painstakingly accumulated spiritual energy would be depleted. Therefore, the Hongjun Pagoda would crazily produce spiritual energy to replenish it. Then, Jun Moxie would practice again. Then, he would find time to replenish it again. The cycle repeated itself. However, this repeated process also brought about a virtuous cycle for Jun Dashao. It directly caused Jun Moxie's cultivation to rise to a new level in these 2 days. However, the disadvantage of Jun Dashao was that he didn't have a good teacher to guide him. He could only rely on himself to explore. This was equivalent to the blind touching an elephant. Little by little, he suffered a lot. What really made Jun Moxie depressed was that it seemed that there was no effect at all. He practiced until he was physically and mentally exhausted. Even his soul, which seemed to know nothing about fatigue, was tired. If there was any effect, it would be that the little lowly Ku'er was a little crazy. That was the only effect that could be seen from it. "Ku'er, can you see me?" "I can see you." "Young master, what do you mean? Are you telling me a joke?" Ku'er opened her big round eyes and tilted her head, looking at him in confusion. "Oh!" Jun Moxie flashed back to the study. "Young master, excuse me. Why are you blocking my way?" Ku'er raised her head. "Young master, don't pull my clothes." "Young master, you are messing up my hair." "Young master, why are you sticking your face to the wall? Are you feeling uncomfortable?" So, Jun Moxie angrily ended the wall test. "Young master, you are very strange today. Gidge, young master, your posture is very ugly. Young master, what are you? I don't hit your head against the tree. If you have a headache, I'll call a doctor for you." The little lowly was completely scared. Fu**K. Jun Mo Xie was going crazy. "How the hell do I train with this broken thing? Aren't you playing with me?" After experimenting hundreds of times, Jun Moxie silently sat down under a big tree in the courtyard. In order to practice this escape technique, Jun Dashao had paid a painful price. At the very least, his forehead was red because he wanted to go through the wall. The top of his head was bumpy like the head of the Buddha. He was experimenting with the escape technique. Leaping high in the air, he fell head first onto the ground, and with a loud thud, he saw stars all around him. His clothes were on fire. and his body was covered in blisters. This was the only result of practicing the escape technique. As for the wind escape technique, cough cough, Jun Dashao didn't know about it for the time being. As for the yin-yang escape technique, damn it, do I have to go to hell to practice it? If I continue to practice, I might cross over again. Jun Mo Xie looked at his scarred body with a sad expression. He suddenly lowered his head, and his disheveled hair stuck into his crotch. Then, he rolled on the ground like an egg. Little Ku was scared to death. Grandpa Jun had often been away from home ever since he had handed over his position as the family head to his son, Junwoo Yi. Moreover, Junwoo had also learned the art of disguising himself. So, it was impossible to see his shadow. Therefore, the little lowly was left with no choice but to ask Guan Qinghan. Swearing and shedding tears, he finally managed to invite Guan Qinghan over. When Guan Qinghan arrived, she saw Jun Dashao with his head stuck in his crotch. His whole body was bent into a ball and rolling on the ground. The worst part was that his clothes weren't covering his body. For example, the big hole on his buttocks was very white and dazzling, although the skin was very smooth. Bah, what am I thinking about? What are you doing? Guan Qinghan was a little surprised and coldly looked at her brother-in-law. Is it fun to abuse yourself? I really don't know what's wrong with this guy. What's wrong with him? Look at him. He's even more artistic than a beggar. Jun Mo Xie raised his head blankly and mumbled something to himself. His eyes were bloodshot, and he stared at Guan Qinghan for a while. But it seemed as if he hadn't seen anything. Then he suddenly held his head in his hands and started to ponder. Then he jumped up with a wah-ha sound and crashed into a tree with a bang sound. Then he fell back down and sprawled on the ground. His eyes were looking at the sky, but they were filled with a look of contemplation. Guan Qinghan was angry and amused at the same time. She scolded, "Why are you still not standing up? What kind of behavior is this? You're the only descendant of the third generation of the Jun family." But now, Jun Moxie's mind was completely immersed in the study of the yin-yang escape. Once he was focused, there was no distractions in his mind. To put it nicely, he didn't care about anything around him. But to put it bluntly, he was stubborn and wouldn't turn back no matter if he hit the wall or not. Even if his head was bleeding, he would continue to hit the wall. How could he hear what Guan Qinghan was saying? He didn't even know that his beautiful sister-in-law, Guan Qinghan, was already in front of him. This was what he was persistent about, and it might also be the reason for his success. No matter what he did, he would concentrate all his energy and intelligence, and do his best. He furrowed his brows and thought hard for a while. Then he suddenly leaped up and landed on the ground with his head down and feet up, bang. Jun Moxie twitched a few times, and his eyes rolled back. He smiled foolishly and said, "I need to quickly practice martial arts so that I can peep my beautiful sister-in-law bathing." Then his body stiffened, and he fainted. Only God knows how this sentence slipped out of his mouth. Perhaps even Jun Moxie himself didn't know why he would say such a sentence in such a muddle-headed situation. My God, God, and God, what is this? In front of his beautiful sister-in-law, he said that he wanted to peep at her bathing. Guan Qinghan was so angry that her delicate body trembled, and her pretty face turned pale. Young mistress, young master's mind is muddled now. He's talking nonsense. Please don't take it seriously. Young master. He has improved a lot recently. Ku'er's face was red, and she waved her hands in embarrassment, stammering as she explained. Guan Qinghan's eyes were spitting fire, and she snorted coldly. Ku'er, now even you are helping this bastard to do evil. Without saying a word, she rushed forward, and with a bang, she kicked him heavily. Thinking that it wasn't enough to vent her anger, she wanted to kick him again. Jun Mo Xie let out an "oh no" and stood up from the ground. His expression was one of pleasant surprise, joy, and bewilderment. His expression changed several times in an instant, and it seemed incomparably strange. Guan Qinghan didn't say a word, and her eyes were filled with tears. What Jun Moxie said just now could be said to be a great humiliation to her. She opened her hand and slapped Jun Moxie's face. Jun Moxie raised his head, took a step back, and dodged the slap. he said in surprise. Sister-in-law, everything was fine. What are you doing? Based on his intuition, that slap just now was definitely not at the level of beating him up in a normal sparring session. If he really took that slap, he reckoned that half of his teeth would fall off. You know it in your heart. You bastard! Guan Qing Han shouted angrily, and her pretty face was as cold as frost. She pressed forward step by step. June Moxie took each step carefully and calmly dodged. I don't remember offending you, sister-in-law. Why are you like this today? How else do you want to offend me? Guan Qing Han saw that this bastard brother-in-law was so shamelessly quibbling. She snorted coldly. Seeing that she couldn't do anything to him with her fists and legs, she suddenly pulled out the long sword from her waist. The sword light flashed in the air, and with a swoosh, it stabbed towards June Moxie's shoulder. June Moxie was shocked. What's going on? She actually used a knife? Confused, he rolled and crawled to avoid the attack. He had already overdrawn his body's Xian power no less than 100 times today. He was already physically and mentally exhausted. At this moment, he suddenly understood something, and the spiritual energy that he had painstakingly replenished was depleted once again. Now that he was facing Guan Qing Han, it was tantamount to being abused, especially when he couldn't fight back. Naturally, it was even worse. With a bad thought, he made a prompt decision and quickly turned to run. Kuer jumped to stop Guan Qing Han, but with her insignificant cultivation, how could she stop the raging Guan Qing Han? When Fatty Tang heard the noise outside, he lied on the bed and shouted, "Murder!" Immediately, it was a mess. At this moment, the gatekeeper ran over young master, young madam, Jiangnan's housekeeper, Lord Guan, and 2 young masters have brought people to visit. Guan Qing Han cried out, and her long sword fell to the ground. Chapter 157. Jiangnan's housekeeper was from Guan Qing Han's family. However, he didn't know why the housekeeper and his entourage had suddenly come to Tianxiang City at such a time of crisis. Could it be that the housekeeper also wants the level 9 Xiandan? June Moxie frowned slightly. He felt that something was wrong. The capital city had been in chaos for the past 2 days. The day was quiet and peaceful as usual. But every night, the city guards would find several corpses during their patrols. Sometimes they would even find dozens of corpses. How could such a strange thing not attract the attention of the military of the 5 cities? So, they joined forces with the Ministry of Justice and the city guards to keep a close watch on the movements in the capital city. Several big gangs in the capital city were also getting restless. They were even willing to risk the tight security to commit crimes. This made the investigation even more difficult. As for the results of the investigation, it gave everyone a shock. None of the people who had died were ordinary people. They were all famous figures in Jianghu. Some of them were even at the Earth Xian level. They were all characters who could dominate a region. But now, he had died silently in the capital city. And among the few people who had been investigated, there was no one below the Silver Xian realm. Not a single one. Even the weakest one was at the peak of the Silver Xian realm. Such murders were becoming more and more frequent with the increase in the number of foreigners. This was especially true for the most recent incident, which contained the corpses of members of the Morong family, one of the great families in the capital. As they continued investigating, the leaders of the 5 cities' military office, the city guards' army, and the Ministry of Punishment were instantly dumbfounded. The Morong clan was not the only one who had interfered in this matter. The Li clan, the Song clan, and the Meng clan were also involved in this matter. Even though they did not have any direct evidence, the vague momentum was definitely not wrong. Even the 3 princes seemed to be vaguely involved in this matter. How could they investigate? They couldn't investigate until they found out about their own family. Although they didn't dare to investigate further, the 3 officials were muttering in their hearts. Is it going to be a big change? Especially when the envoys from the 2 countries arrived in Tianxiang City. The night in Tianxiang City became even more turbulent. Once night fell, the demons danced wildly as they flew high up in the sky. All kinds of profound energy lights of different colors flew here and there. In the end, The city guards simply found a high place to squat down and enjoy this gorgeous but bloody fireworks show for free. The solitary falcon was walking down the street in a cold and heavy manner. He hadn't come across anyone of the same level as him in the last 2 nights, and although he was somewhat regretful that he hadn't come across anyone of the same level as him, but he was a martial arts fanatic. Therefore, the solitary falcon could be said to be one of the most active people in the city these last 2 nights, and would attack anyone that he came across, regardless of who the other party was or how strong they were. Of course, Solitary Eagle didn't think that he was bullying people. I didn't intend to kill anyone. I only wanted to learn from each other. It's your strength that's too trashy. You can't even take a few of my moves. How can you blame me? Anyone who had fought with him had lost more than half of their life. If they were unlucky and met other groups of people, they basically didn't have the strength to fight back and were one-sidedly slaughtered. Therefore, strange things were happening in Tianxiang City these days. Silver-level Xianqi practitioners killed gold-level Xianqi practitioners, and gold-level Xianqi practitioners killed Yu Xian. It was a complete mess. Solitary Eagle was walking slowly toward the big house. After 2 nights, Solitary Eagle didn't feel that he had gained much. After all, at his level, ordinary low-level Xianqi practitioners wouldn't be able to give him much inspiration. Therefore, Solitary Eagle locked his target on Earth Xianqi practitioners. However, if he wanted to find the whereabouts of these people, he would need to have a specialized intelligence network. If he only met them on the road, how long would that take? Therefore, Solitary Eagle was walking coldly towards Tianxiang City's #1 gang, the Jinyang Gang's headquarters. This was a shortcut. As long as he subdued the Jinyang Gang, he would be able to find the whereabouts of the experts in the Tianxiang City. With the ability of the Prairie's Eagle God, wouldn't it be a piece of cake for him to clean up a local gang? Even if the Jinyang Gang was the #1 gang in the Tianxiang City, it was still just a Jianghu gang. How could they escape from the hands of the Prairie's Eagle God? Therefore, Solitary Eagle was very confident. In fact, it should be said that he was very confident. Boom! The thick door of the Jinyang Gang suddenly broke into pieces and turned into sawdust. The people who were drinking tea inside were startled and stood up. The Jinyang Gang was the leader of the 6 biggest gangs in the Tianxiang City. Who had the guts to provoke them? Amidst the flying sawdust, a figure slowly walked in. Long hair and black clothes. Tell Jin Feng Lai to come and see me. The solitary falcon's imposing manner was like that of a monarch's, and he sat down in the hall and didn't even look at the people around him as he began to issue orders. The Jinyang Gang might be the leader of the 6 biggest gangs in the Tianxiang capital, and Jin Feng Lai was its leader, but in the eyes of the solitary falcon, there wasn't much difference between the Jinyang Gang's leader and a common peddler. In fact, the solitary falcon felt that he could kill them at any time, and that the existence of the Jinyang Gang was like that of an ant. The members of the Jinyang Gang looked at each other in dismay for a moment, but then started shouting and cursing, and rushed forward with their swords and benches clattering against each other. The solitary falcon snorted, stood up, and punched out with both his fists. Suddenly, blood began to flow like the sunset, and the blade began to fly in all directions, and then everything became quiet. At night, Jun Moxie was still obsessed with the yin-yang escape technique. He was still diligently practicing the yin-yang escape technique. However, this one-track-minded killer almost choked himself to death. Ever since Guan Qinghan's kick, Jun Mo Xie had suddenly understood something. The ancients had a sudden enlightenment, and now that sister-in-law had kicked him, he suddenly had a flash of insight. Since then, Jun Mo Xie had also recovered from his daze, and had begun to practice with his back to the others. He had forbidden anyone from getting close to him. Even Kair had not been allowed to watch from the side. This was because the yin-yang escape technique was unprecedented. If it caused a sensation, then the news of Jun Moxie practicing this technique would spread faster than any other news. After experimenting several times in the afternoon, Jun Moxie had made great progress. He was able to stay invisible for 3 breaths and move 10 feet. However, these 3 breaths were not to be underestimated. In a fight between experts, life and death could be decided in an instant. not to mention 3 breaths. Even a single breath was enough to kill the enemy 10 times over. Such a result made the hitman June extremely happy. His mind heated up, and he started to practice the Earth Escape technique. The Earth Escape technique was the stuff of legends. Imagine fighting with an enemy, and then suddenly disappearing without a trace. Then a long sword would emerge from the ground and kill the enemy in one fell swoop. How satisfying would that be? So, Junimo Sia gathered his spiritual power and started chanting the incantation in the courtyard. There was a whooshing sound, and Junimo Sia's shadow really disappeared. But the problem had also become apparent. He had burrowed himself into the ground, but he couldn't come out. Afraid of failure, Jun Moxie had accumulated his spiritual energy to the brim. In one breath, he had gone several feet into the ground. He knew that he had succeeded and couldn't help but feel complacent. But when he wanted to come out, he found that there was a problem. He had already exhausted his spiritual energy. It was true that he needed spiritual energy to come in, but he also needed spiritual energy to go out. But now he didn't have any left. What should I do now? What should I do? Stay in the ground. Jun Moxie felt a huge pressure coming from all directions. For the first time, he felt that the earth also had power. But the biggest problem was suffocation. There was no air in the ground. Even if it wasn't a vacuum, it was almost impossible to breathe. That was the real problem. Trying to climb up with brute force? But who knew how deep he had gone? Besides, the Jun family's courtyard soil wasn't ordinary soil. That day, the Hong Jun Pagoda had pressed down the courtyard by 3 feet. It was equivalent to using a 10,000-pound hammer to tamp down the soil. It was estimated that the soil was now stronger than ordinary granite. Trying to use your head to get out? No way. Jun Moxie crazily called for the Hong Jun Pagoda. But today, this great god seemed to be in a bad mood. He actually refused to appear. For one day and one night, the Hong Jun Pagoda supplied spiritual energy to Jun Moxie to practice the yin-yang escape. This had happened more than 100 times. It was like 2 football fans going to the field. One of them was itching to play, but he still had to pick up the ball and throw it to the other for practice. The other fan, on the other hand, was itching to play, but there was no room for him to play. Could it be that this pagoda also knew how to be angry? Damn it, but don't choose this time to be angry. I'm about to suffocate to death. Jun Moxie wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He felt the suffocating feeling in his body getting stronger and stronger. His whole body felt like it was congested. His heart was beating faster and faster. It was as if it was about to jump out of his mouth. But he couldn't move his body. The spiritual energy in his body was long gone. He couldn't even move a finger. Could it be that he had to go through another time? But this time, it was too humiliating. It didn't sound good. At this time, Jun Moxie strangely remembered the day he had gone through another time. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. Damn it! Ever since I met you, this damn broken pagoda, I haven't met anything good. In my previous life, I had an earth-shattering divine skill. But I couldn't move because of you. I could only watch as dozens of guns fired at me and turned me into a sieve. Dozens of grenades were dropped on me and blew me into pieces. Now, I'm paralyzed because of you. I can't move at all. I'm waiting to die from suffocation. It didn't take long for Jun Moxie to reach the limit of his endurance. He only felt that his head was ringing. He was afraid that he would faint at any time. But he couldn't faint. He tried to move his dantian countless times, but there was still no movement. There was no reaction. Even his thoughts were muddled. He couldn't think with normal thinking at this moment. A golden light suddenly flashed in his mind. The Hongjun Pagoda had finally appeared. It was spinning slowly and gracefully. Young Master Jun didn't even have the strength to curse at this moment. He just waited quietly. Chapter 158. Suddenly, he felt a cooling sensation on his head. It turned out that the Hongjun Pagoda's spiritual energy had surged down in a direct manner, all the way to his dantian, and then swept upwards. Jun Moxie immediately felt the suffocating feeling disappear. He couldn't help but feel refreshed, and quickly used this new wave of spiritual energy to recover his strength. When he had recovered a third of his strength, he couldn't wait any longer and quickly used the yin-yang escape technique. Puff! June Moxie finally poked his head out of the ground and breathed in fresh air. He suddenly felt as if he had come back from the dead and greedily breathed in. My God, I've never realized that this air is actually so cute and delicious. Panting heavily, June Moxie actually didn't realize that only half of his body had poked out of the ground, and that the lower half of his body was still buried in the soil. Young master. A high-pitched voice suddenly rang out, and the little lowly Ku'er ran over, crying as she ran. Young master, what happened to you? Who did this? How could they be so heartless, so immoral, burying a living person? Boo-hoo. June Moxie. And an asterisk. In hashtag. I can't possibly tell this little girl that I bury myself, right? That's too shameful. No, even if you beat me to death, I can't say it. Grand Aunt, don't shout anymore. You're deliberately letting more people know about this young master's embarrassing matter. After a Herculean effort, he finally convinced the little lowly to stop her surging tears. With great difficulty, June Moxie pulled himself out like a green onion on dry land. His waist hurt, his legs were sore, and there wasn't a single part of his body that didn't feel uncomfortable. This was all solid ground, but there wasn't a single crack. It would be strange if he didn't feel uncomfortable. Although Ku'er was one of his people, the less people who knew about this strange matter, the safer it would be. June Moxie originally wanted to recover his spirit, and once again use the technique, he would be able to pull himself out without any injuries. However, he was accidentally discovered by Ku'er, and June Moxie was in for a tragedy. He couldn't just pull himself out in front of the little lowly with a whoosh and then leave a hole in the ground, right? Wasn't that too ridiculous? Wouldn't he scare this little girl out of her mind on the spot? If he couldn't keep his mouth shut and blurted it out, then June Sunshao would be in big trouble. After digging a big hole in the ground, June Moxie crawled out in exhaustion. He lay on the ground and groaned. After reminding the little lowly not to say anything, June Moxie was about to return to his room when suddenly, oh my God! Hitman June had never lost so much face in both of his lives. But today was the day he had lost so much face. Third young master, my dearest third young master. Brother Emos, yeah. Uncle, my dearest uncle. Where are you? Come quickly, come quickly. Fatty Tang's cries resounded through the sky like a pig being slaughtered. That kind of intense surprise had already surged to the extreme, like a pervert who hadn't been able to find a wife for 8 lifetimes, suddenly seeing the 7 fairies in the sky bathing in front of him. June Moxie nervously pushed open the door to Fatty's room, only to find that Tang Yuan's personal maid was already scared like an old sow sifting chaff, hiding behind the door and trembling incessantly. It was the middle of the night, and Fatty Tang's earth-shattering howl had attracted the attention of the June family's patrolling dogs in unison. It was a magnificent sight to behold. Oh God! Fatty Tang continued to chant, his eyes brimming with tears as he looked at June Moxie, his body trembling violently to get out of bed. His expression was incomparably excited. His small eyes that were half covered by his fat were miraculously wide open, and his face was radiant with the radiance of pilgrimage. This appearance was like that of a devout Buddhist who had suddenly seen the Buddha appear in front of him. My God! Uncle, lie down quickly. June Moxie took 3 steps at a time. If he really let this fatty fall out of bed, he reckoned that this guy would be crippled for the rest of his life. If he let this guy become crippled in his own home, then it would be the same for him. How could June Moxie not be anxious? Tang Yuan's eyes were brimming with tears, his lips trembling. You what you? Stop you in. June Moxie squinted his eyes, his anger rising. Fatty, I'll call you Big Brother, all right? Please don't be so excited. It's already the middle of the night. Even if you don't rest, you have to let others rest. You have some pity on my night patrol dogs. They've been working hard for the whole day. Why don't you let them rest? Why are they accompanying you in the middle of the night and excitedly barking? I'm gonna F King die. Tang Yuan stared straight at June Moxie, suddenly sobbing. Third young master, I really didn't know that you actually have such a talent. The wisdom to bring peace and stability to the country, the unfathomable schemes, the world-shaking mind, the truly unparalleled genius, the peerless talent, the brilliance of the world. My worship for you is like a surging river, surging wave after wave, like the eternal Tian Fa forest, like the eternal snowy peak that connects the sky, like the eternal surging of the boundless ocean. F asterisk CK me, my F asterisk CK me, you really... Stop. The series of flattery made June Moxie confused, but at the same time, he felt that he was not being praised. Finally, he used a bit of clarity to stop Fatty Tang's endless chatter. What exactly are you trying to do? This fatty must be plotting something. How am I talented? Although this is the truth, everyone can see that I'm so talented, even a fatty like you can see that I'm just an introvert. This business plan... Fatty Tang's hands trembled as he pinched a few pieces of paper in his hands. Was it really written by you? You didn't hire a gunman? June Moxie nodded his head in confusion. Yes, why? Why would I hire a gunman for this? There was really no need to hire a gunman. In his previous life, Jun Dashao was the king of assassins. As he often needed to disguise his identity, he still needed to master some basic knowledge, such as the business plan given a fatty. That business plan was not considered top-notch. Perhaps any graduate from a famous business university would be more outstanding than Jun Dashao. It was just some simple ideas. If it was too in-depth, he would not be able to write it out. Is there a need for this? What's wrong? You're asking me what's wrong. Tang Yuan was inexplicably excited. He got carried away and grabbed June Moxie's hand, holding it with all his might. Master, Master, please accept a bow from your disciple. No, Master, please accept me as your disciple. It's not a problem to be your disciple. Ugh, I'm too excited. Jun Mo Xie suddenly felt as if his hands had been wrapped in a thick sponge. He hastily tried to pull his hands out, but Fatty used all his strength to resist. Jun Mo Xie's physical strength was at its lowest point, so he couldn't pull his hands out no matter what. Then he heard Fatty plead with tears in his eyes, Master, please be merciful and accept me as your disciple. Fatty, if you keep acting like this, do you believe I'll throw you into the pigsty alive? Just let go of me. Jun Moxie threatened fiercely, then scratched his head in confusion. This plan, could it be that there's something good about it? Could it be that there's really a saying that when a protagonist casually comes up with something, there will be lackeys crying and begging to hug his thighs? Fatty Tang reluctantly let go of his hands, but when he heard this, he immediately glared and shouted with dissatisfaction. What do you mean by there's something good about it? There should be a limit to boasting, even though this is obviously the ultimate treasure of business. It's a huge invention that has never been seen or heard of before. It's a treasure that is worthy of any businessman in the world to worship, study, and study diligently for the rest of their lives. But you have to be humble. Only then can you have the demeanor of a grandmaster in the business world. As he spoke, Fatty Tang became excited again. Huh, is it really that good? Jun Moxie was really doubtful. How did I become a business guru of my generation? After all, he had never really done business before. At most, he was just pretending to be a businessman. This information was only what he had heard and seen in his previous life. He had scribbled down everything that he could think of. He was prepared to let Fatty Tang use his discretion, but he didn't have much assurance in his heart. He didn't expect that Fatty Tang would actually hold it in such high esteem, which was unexpected. Hitman Jun had obviously ignored the limitations of the two eras he had experienced and the comparability of the business world. It's scary to have no knowledge, but it's even scarier to have advanced knowledge. Tang Yuan took 2 deep breaths and then grimaced in pain. His previous torment had already affected his wounds, but he was too excited before, so he didn't feel it. Now that he had calmed down, he naturally felt it. Fatty said with a bitter face, "Third young master, quickly look at my butt. Is it bleeding? It hurts a lot." Blarg. Jun Moxie retched. "Damn it, I'm not looking. In case you spray it again, This young master still needs to keep this face of mine to pick up girls. Tang Yuan was both angry and amused at the same time. He felt pained and embarrassed at the same time. Mother asterisk her. Do you think you could just spit it out whenever you want? I didn't take any medicine today, and I didn't even eat anything. June Moxie straightened out his wounds and said in a serious tone, Fatty, seriously speaking, can this idea really be used? Believe me, this is absolutely the golden rule of all businessmen in the world. It's full of wonderful ideas that have never been seen before. As long as we follow the instructions, and at most make some slight changes, you and I will definitely become the richest people in the continent. Tang Yuan pointed to the sky and swore, Third young master, as long as you have the goods, Tang Yuan, will open shops all over the continent. Damn it, even if it's the Xin beasts in the Tianfa forest, as long as they have the money, I can open a shop there. That's good. June Moxie exhaled. In the future, I won't care about this. When you recover, you'll be responsible for everything. Remember, as long as it's business matters, whether it's looking for people, buying land, building, hiring, opening shops, keeping secrets, etc. Don't look for me for anything. I'm really not interested in this stuff. Don't worry, I understand. When a master reaches the peak, he will not want to experience a journey without an opponent again. I really understand. This time, I, Tang Yuan, will do it for you. Gold and silver will roll in. Just wait and see. Tang Yuan was full of confidence. As he spoke, his eyes focused on the papers again, and he was full of praise as he looked at them. Then I'm going to sleep. I still have things to do tomorrow. June Moxie said tentatively, Go away, go away. Don't disturb my mood. This is good stuff. Tang Yuan waved his hand, as if he was shooing away a fly, his eyes still fixed on the papers. Damn it. Just now you said you wanted to worship me as your master, and now this attitude. You disobedient disciple who deceives your master. June Moxie scolded angrily, but there was no response. Tang Yuan's attention was completely not on him now. Chapter 159. Although he had gone through a lot of trouble, June Moxie was pleasantly surprised to find that the qi in his body had increased by a lot. Even the yin-yang escape technique could support him for a few more breaths of time. However, the thing that made June Moxie the most pleasantly surprised was that he had realized something through this incident. No matter how powerful the Hongjun Pagoda was, it was only the Hongjun Pagoda and not June Moxie. The most reliable thing was still his own strength. Therefore, it was most important not to rely on external things, but to focus on improving his own strength. Tomorrow afternoon was the appointed time of 3 days, and June Moxie still needed to make some preparations. Therefore, after activating the Hongjun Pagoda to repair his body, June Moxie went straight to the wine warehouse and fiddled with it for a long time. Under the boundless night sky, Jun Wui was wearing a mask, and his entire body was bathed in blood as he jumped over the wall of a big house in the capital. He looked at the group of boys and girls who were supporting each other as they walked away, and his eyes were full of gratification. One mustn't misunderstand. The third master Jun's current strength had allowed him to bathe in blood. However, he had bathed in the blood of other people. So, how could there be any experts guarding these filthy places? So, it was easy for him to move around. The big house behind him was full of corpses. This was the third stronghold that he had destroyed since he regained his ability to move around. Now, Jun Wui completely agreed with June Moxie's words. Some people disregard the law and are inhuman. For this, we can only kill them, cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, and use violence to control violence. That is the right way. If they had not carefully investigated and secretly followed him, who would have thought that the home of this wealthy man, who had a good reputation, was actually such a filthy place? During the first operation, Jun Wui had held back and only injured the people inside and did not kill them. Then, he had anonymously sent a message to the city guards, asking them to detain these people and enforce the law. Who would have thought that in just one day, those people would disappear from the dungeon without a trace? Jun Wui asked around and found out that these people had been taken to a secret place to recuperate. They were served with delicacies and precious herbs every day. In a fit of rage, Jun Wui rushed in and killed everyone. From then on, Jun Tryleaf learned his lesson. Since the law couldn't punish him, he would enforce justice on behalf of the heavens with his sword. Let me represent the moon, represent the heavens to punish him. With a cold smile, Jun Wui rose up and disappeared in a flash, leaving behind a pale blue light. In another corner of the capital, a man in blue sat cross-legged on a bed with his eyes lowered, not saying a word. In front of him was a heavily injured black-clothed man wrapped in countless bandages. "Brother, if it wasn't for the fact that I have no other choice, I wouldn't have come to beg you. You came to Tianxiang City from thousands of miles away, and not only did I not treat you well, but I also made you wade into these muddy waters. I feel very guilty. But brother, if you didn't help me, I'm afraid that my life's work would have been gone without a trace." The black-clothed man who was speaking was the leader of Tianxiang City's #1 underground gang, the Jinyang Gang's leader, Jin Feng Lai. After Solitary Eagle had wreaked havoc in the Jinyang Gang, the leader of the Jinyang Gang had been defeated by him in less than 3 moves. And this was because Solitary Eagle had been lenient. Otherwise, his head would have been twisted off in the first move. For a person who stood at the peak of the world to deal with a gang leader, it was not even worth mentioning. Even if it was the #1 gang in the Tianxiang Empire, it would still be the same. Jin Feng Lai was at the middle stage of the Earth Xian realm. Perhaps he was already an unreachable existence in the eyes of ordinary people, but in the eyes of a spirit Xian expert, he was only a slightly larger ant. After that, Solitary Eagle proposed the surrender of the Jinyang Gang and deliberately gave Jin Feng Lai 2 days to consider. As far as the Solitary Falcon was concerned, it was only a matter of time before the Jinyang Gang would surrender to him. But if Jin Feng Lai could find a strong enough expert to help him, then that would be a good thing. Therefore, he didn't reveal his identity to the Solitary Falcon. Otherwise, with Solitary Eagle's status, he would be giving face to the Jinyang Gang and Jin Feng Lai. Unfortunately, Jin Feng Lai didn't know. "Brother Jin, you said you only took 3 moves from him?" The blue-robed man's face was handsome, and he looked to be about 40 years old. His face was calm. 3 moves? Do you know that even if it isn't difficult for me to defeat you with my current cultivation, it won't be easy for me to defeat you within 3 moves? This man's Xian skills are above mine, maybe even far beyond mine. "Brother Hai, don't tell me you..." Jin Feng Lai was tongue-tied, but the words "don't tell me you don't care" were stuck in his throat. The blue-robed man stood up and paced back and forth in the room. His blue robe was flowing like the sea, and as he walked, he felt as if the waves of the sea were rolling away. But now, the blue-robed man's heart was bursting with annoyance. He had been stuck at the peak of the sky profound realm for more than 10 years, and had never been able to break through. This time, he had also heard the news about the peak of level 9 Xian Core. Although he knew that there was not much hope, but he still held on to that tiny bit of hope. He had traveled day and night, hoping that he could get lucky. Who knew that he would encounter such a troublesome matter as soon as he arrived? The blue-robed man's name was Hai Chun Feng, and he was a freak of the seas. He was temperamental and only acted according to his heart. He was always free and unrestrained. It was difficult to distinguish between good and evil. More than 10 years ago, Hai Chun Feng had come to Tianxiang City and had a conflict with someone. That person was an expert from the Yu family. Although Hai Chun Feng was defeated, he was besieged by several people from the Yu family and was eventually seriously injured. If not for Jin Feng Lai's help, this freak would have already stepped on the road to the Yellow Springs. Hai Chun Feng was a man who knew how to repay kindness. In just 1 year, he had helped Jin Feng Lai expand the influence of the Jinyang Gang from a small gang to become the #1 gang in Tianxiang City, and then floated away. The reason why they had come to the Tianxiang City to participate in the competition for the level 9 Xian Core, even though they knew that there were a lot of experts in the city, was because they wanted to rely on the Jinyang Gang. After all, the Jinyang Gang had deep roots in Tianxiang City, and they were well informed. If the Jinyang Gang were to help him, then his chances of seizing the Xiandan would naturally increase. However, he didn't expect that the Jinyang gang would come to him first before he could even ask for help from the Jinyang gang. Hai Chunfeng felt extremely depressed for a moment. He couldn't help but ask himself, is Tianxiang City a forbidden place for me? Hai Chunfeng? I can't even set foot in here? If not, then why is there such a big trouble waiting for me every time I come here? According to Jin Feng Lai, the strength of the mysterious black-robed man was at least above his own, and perhaps even stronger. What should I do? He paced back and forth, feeling more and more depressed. He raised his head and sighed inwardly. He had already made a decision. Forget it. I, Hai Chunfeng, am not the kind of person who doesn't repay kindness. A real man should die. He raised his head, looked at Jin Feng Lai, and spoke in a gentle voice. Brother Jin, please tell that man that I, Hai Chunfeng, will be waiting for him in the southern forest in 3 days. Thank you, Brother Hai. Jin Feng Lai was overjoyed. I knew that you wouldn't just stand by and watch. Over the years, Jin Feng Lai had been very confident in Hai Chunfeng, and had never failed in anything that Hai Chunfeng had handled. The reason why he had dragged the solitary eagle along this time was because Hai Chunfeng was in Tianxiang City at the moment. Jin Feng Lai firmly believed that no matter how powerful the black-robed man was, he could not be stronger than the invincible Hai Chunfeng. Jin Feng Lai was even thinking about where he should celebrate Hai Chunfeng's victory. Ignorance was truly terrifying. One could easily lose one's life, and that of one's family and friends. He didn't even consider that Hai Chunfeng was not invincible. He didn't know that Hai Chunfeng's heart was filled with bitterness at the moment. The battle with the mysterious black-robed man bodes ill rather than well. I believe that even if I win by luck, I'm afraid that it will be a Pyrrhic victory, and I'm afraid that I won't have the strength to fight for the Xiandan. But I can't not repay the kindness of saving my life. Let me do one last thing for the Jinyang gang. Regardless of the outcome of this matter, I, Hai Chunfeng, will immediately leave Tianxiang City and will never return. Brother Hai, by the way, did you come to Tianxiang City for the matter of the level 9 Xiandan? Jin Feng Lai said excitedly. Once this matter is settled, I will immediately arrange for the whole gang to investigate. Haha, to tell you the truth, I had already guessed your intentions when I received the news of your arrival. Therefore, I had already made the necessary arrangements. Jin Feng Lai smiled and said, with the help of Brother Hai and the entire Jinyang gang, I believe that obtaining the level 9 Xiandan will not be difficult. No, you're wrong. I didn't come here for the level 9 Xiandan. Hai Chunfeng slowly shook his head, and a trace of bitterness flashed in his eyes. It's been 10 years since we last met, and I've missed you very much. Therefore, I came to visit Brother Jin, and I will go into closed-door training once I return. Since I've already anticipated the dangers of this trip, how can I let you get involved in this? I'll bear all the pain and consequences alone. So that's how it is. Jin Feng Lai couldn't help but feel sad. Then, I don't know when I will see you again, brother. This time, you should stay for 2 more days, and we will have a good reunion. Perhaps the next time we meet will be when you will have a breakthrough in your Xian Qi cultivation. Chapter 160. Jin Feng Lai stood up in spite of his injuries. How can this be? Why not? Brother Jin, you don't need to be present in the fight 3 days from now. Hai Chunfeng turned around and said in a low voice, I will deal with the black-robed man alone. This matter is settled. Haha, if you see me die on the spot, won't you rush out and risk your lives? That would only increase the number of casualties needlessly. If you hear about my death or defeat from someone else's mouth, perhaps you won't feel so bad if you don't witness it with your own eyes. I, Hai Chunfeng, can only do this much for you after many years of friendship. Hai Chunfeng spoke in a resolute and decisive manner, turned to face the wall, and sat down cross-legged without making another sound. Brother Hai, Jin Feng Lai called out, suddenly feeling an infinitely heavy feeling in his heart. For the first time, he had some misgivings in his heart. Was it right or wrong to ask for Brother Hai's help? Will Brother Hai be in danger? He had always been confident in Hai Chan Feng's victory, so he hadn't been worried before. He had always felt that as long as Hai Chen Feng was willing to help, everything would be fine. It had never occurred to him that Brother Hai, whom he regarded as a god, would fail. Hai Chan Feng didn't speak again. Jin Feng Lai sighed in a low voice and withdrew with a heavy heart. Jun Moxie woke up and felt that there was something strange in the courtyard. He put on his clothes and went out. The sky was just beginning to brighten. More than 200 men were neatly lined up in the small courtyard. Each and every one of them had their bodies perfectly straight. When they saw that Jun Mo Xie had come out of the door, they uniformly shouted in unison, "Young master, we've returned." Jun Moxie smiled as he looked at these 200 strong men patrolling one by one, and secretly nodded in his heart. These men's long-lost battle spirit had been completely restored. Their bodies, in addition to the valiant and iron-blooded temperament of soldiers, now had a bloodthirsty aura similar to that of wild beasts. And Jun Moxie wanted them to have this aura as their first step. "How's the result?" Jun Moxie asked with a smile. Reporting to Young Master, during this training trip, a total of 300 people left the courtyard. 27 people left the team midway. In the Tianfa forest, 19 people lost their lives, and a total of 46 people died. The rest of the 254 people were all here. Among them, 130 of them had broken through the 9th grade and reached the Silver Xian initial stage. 84 of them had advanced to the Silver Xian intermediate stage. 36 of them had reached the Silver Xian peak stage. 4 of them had broken through to the Gold Xian Qi. The mission of hunting Xian beasts that Young Master gave us before we left has been completed. A large man stepped out from the crowd and reported in a loud voice. His voice was filled with unconcealable excitement. They knew that this was a huge improvement for them. "Very good," Jun Moxie praised. "You did better than I expected. Over the past few days, did anyone feel the changes in their bodies? Are you different from before?" The moment Jun Moxie's words came out, the 200-plus people immediately laughed in embarrassment. Thinking back to the time when they were idling around in the Jun family, how could they have imagined that they would actually improve so much? And this kind of progress was all forced out by this young master, in front of him time and time again, through deathly training. Compared to the time when they were in the Jun family's courtyard, their strength had more than doubled. Remember, everyone's achievements are forced out of them. As long as you continue to force yourself, your body will have endless potential to be unearthed. Even a coward can become a warrior. But if you don't force yourself to be ruthless, you can only be like rotten wood, slowly rotting. Even a warrior will become more timid than a coward. Jun Moxie said in a low voice, "Are your current achievements really that high? Let me tell you, this is only the beginning for you. Because your current highest achievement is only gold level Xian Qi, but there are so many jade level, earth Xian Qi, Tian Xian, and supreme Shun Xian in the world. They can force themselves to such a high level, and I find it strange that you can't do the same. Humans have 2 eyes and 1 mouth. Supreme Shun Xian is not a monster with 3 heads and 6 arms. So, the road in front of you is still very long and very long. Haste makes waste. You don't need to look too far ahead now. You just need to push yourselves harder every day. One day, you'll realize that you've unknowingly reached a new height that you've never dreamed of before. Yes, we will follow the young master's instructions." Everyone's face turned solemn. Before they received the young master's training, they did not pay much attention to him. Everyone had been bewildered after the training, but they had followed his instructions to the letter. Moreover, they had strictly followed his instructions in the forest. Therefore, they had managed to avoid disaster several times. Therefore, these 254 people had been thoroughly convinced by Jun Mo Xie. Go and look for the 3rd uncle and see how he will arrange your duties. Jun Moxie waved his hand. Young master, several burly men stepped forward, looking a little excited. We also know that we may not be qualified, but, young master, can you let us follow you? The 3rd uncle will arrange it. Jun Moxie smiled. He was very sure that Jun Wui would definitely assign all these people to him. because this was already a tacit understanding between uncle and nephew. And now, he really needed such a force. This was the reason. Tang Yuan's snores were still earth-shattering, and he occasionally let out one or two sounds. My butt hurts. This kind of sound was followed by such snores. June Moxie could not help but admire this fatty's thoughtlessness. It had really reached an extraordinary level. The sun had just risen when June Wooey slowly entered June Moxie's small courtyard, his wheelchair. Third Master June felt that June Moxie's courtyard was very different from his own. Just the flatness of the ground was much better. After experiencing great joy and sorrow, June Woo, he didn't feel much about sitting in a wheelchair. After all, he could stroll around at night, and even during the day, if he wanted to go out, he could just change his appearance and go out. It seemed that nothing would hinder him. Sitting in a wheelchair for the last few days had given June Woo Yi a sense of pleasure. June Woo Yi couldn't help but feel a little satisfied. You can make your own arrangements for those people, Third Master June said. I'm very busy. Busy with killing people? June Moxie keenly sensed a familiar scent from June Wooey. He squinted his eyes and smiled. Third uncle, you are too mean. Last night, you went out to eat alone and did not call me? June Wooey was startled. He raised his head and could not help but laugh. After I came back, I'd already cleaned up. You little brat. How did you know? Killing people is not only a physical work, but also a work of the heart and mind. June Moxie smiled amusedly. When killing people, it must be because of anger, sorrow, hatred, and righteous indignation. Therefore, to kill someone, one must damage the mind. This is actually similar to using too much anger to damage the liver. After killing people, the hostility will not dissipate, and the body's temperament will naturally be different from usual. Even a valiant general cannot avoid it. This is an extremely important reason why very few people can reach the peak of Xian Qi. June Mo Xia smiled coldly. So after killing someone, you must quickly tidy up your mind and do something that you find enjoyable to do. You must let your mind completely relax. Only then will you be able to get rid of the evil aura and influence of killing someone. Drinking is a good way to do this. That's why most martial artists are addicted to alcohol. In fact, soldiers are the same. So, just taking a bath and changing clothes is far from enough. June Moxie squinted his eyes. However, besides me, I believe there may not be many people in this world who can see it. Third uncle, you can rest assured. June Wooey's face turned red. He was worried about this problem, but June Moxie was silent. Ignorant child, how dare you make fun of this old man? June Moxie looked up at the sky and laughed. Third uncle, you should save this old man for my third aunt. This nephew's teeth ached just from hearing it. This was from the bottom of his heart and was not an exaggeration. Not to mention June Daxiao. Anyone who knew June Daxiao would also feel their teeth ache. Although June Daxiao had been crippled for 10 years, his foundation was excellent. His Xian Qi had never slacked off. Over the past 10 years, there was almost no vicissitudes left on his face. Although June Daxiao was in his 30s, he looked like a 27 or 28-year-old man. Coupled with his excellent foundation, he was definitely an elegant young man with a bit of steadiness and elegance that only a middle-aged man would have. For such a person to suddenly call himself an old man, would you not feel your teeth ache? June Wooey did not know whether to laugh or cry. As long as there is a junior in the family, you can call yourself an old man. Don't you understand such a simple principle? So, if I have a niece or nephew, I can also call myself an old man? June Moxie deliberately made things difficult. I'm only 16 years old. Of course you can. June Wooey replied in a serious manner. How could such a crappy argument be justified? This world was truly crazy. June Moxie fainted and fell to the ground. A 16-year-old can call himself an old man? God, please let me die. This is even more shocking than the heavenly thunder. Is there anything important in the afternoon? June Woo-yi smiled warmly. Remember to come back early. There will be a family banquet tonight to entertain the Guan family and to welcome them. Third uncle, what are they here for? June Moxie took the opportunity to ask. Based on the current situation, there should be only two goals. The first is naturally the ninth level Xiandan. The second is to bring your sister-in-law back. They have already revealed this second point. Jun Wui smiled faintly. Qing Han's staying in our Jun family has greatly damaged her reputation. So, if Qing Han decides to return home, our Jun family must compensate her. The divorce document is essential, but we must also add something else. For example, we must announce it to the world. That way, we won't let down that child for the rest of her life. Chapter 161. Jun Wui frowned slightly. Xia, you and I both know that whether Qing Han stays or goes is the housekeeper's own business and has nothing to do with the Jun family. Although Qing Han holds the title of the Jun family's granddaughter-in-law, it's only in name. In fact, we didn't even have the time to hold the wedding ceremony. So, Qing Han can't be considered as a member of the Jun family in terms of etiquette and fact. However, when your brother died, Qing Han was overwhelmed with grief. In order to take care of her emotions and prevent her from doing anything extreme, we had no choice but to do so. But Qing Han is still young, and she will have another happy marriage. The two of them have a tacit understanding, and even the divorce papers for the annulment of the engagement have already been prepared. It was personally drafted by your grandfather when your elder brother was killed, and it has been preserved ever since. So long as Qing Han nods her head, our Jun family will immediately use all our power and channels, including the families and the governments, to announce to the world that she will be a pure woman. If Qing Han decides to leave, we will sincerely be happy for her. If Qing Han can find a good match, the Jun family will also send her off in large numbers. It's too unfair for her to stay alone in the Jun family. Do you understand this point? Jun Wu raised his head to look at the bright moon in the sky. His eyes were full of deep regret. Qing Han is really a very good girl. It's our Jun family and your brother who are not blessed. Third uncle, if sister-in-law can really find a good match, we will naturally be happy for her. But I always feel that the housekeeper is a little strange. Jun Moxie frowned. He suddenly felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. If the housekeeper ignores Qing Han's happiness and only weighs the interests of the family, then it's naturally a different matter. The housekeeper is Qing Han's maiden family, but the Jun family is Qing Han's maiden family. How can the Jun family's daughter be treated lightly? Jun Wui said in an awe-inspiring tone. This sentence revealed the demeanor of a Tian Xian expert. Third uncle, you're really bold. You're worthy of being a Tian Xian expert, a blood general. Jun Moxie applauded. Get lost. Jun Wui kicked Jun Dashao's buttocks. Tian Xian's skills were not to be underestimated. Jun Moxie flew out like a cloud, and a black thing caught up to him and burrowed into his arms. That's what you want. Jun Wu chuckled and walked away in a leisurely manner. Being able to take advantage of his nephew was a very rare opportunity. The Jun Dashao assassin did a beautiful somersault in the air, landing safely with the legendary, but facing the balance while flattening the sand while falling wild goose style. He glided forward for a while, and then got up with a roll. Jun Wui's strength was on point. He only sent Tian Xian flying with a kick, but did not injure him at all. This fully demonstrated the strength of Tian Xian's master. Jun Moxie took out the black object from his bosom and smiled mysteriously. It was a 6th-level Xian Beast Xiandan. The sun was setting in the west, and it was already the afternoon of the next day. Jun Moxie carried 2 jars of wine and sat in the carriage that he hated the most, a palanquin. He wobbled all the way to Old Song's Tavern. At this time, Old Song's Tavern was already full of anxious people. Old Song had originally planned to open for half a day, but after thinking about it, he decided to close the tavern for the entire day. He directly put up a sign and closed the tavern. In any case, one day of business wouldn't make much of a difference. Then he began to tidy up the tavern in preparation for the competition in the afternoon. Competing and drinking was one of Old Song's greatest pleasures in his life. This was not just one of the pleasures, but the only one. That kind of excitement was far more intense than when he fought against an expert of the same level. Although he did not know if the little demon could really bring a heavenly wine that was 100 times better than his, He could not help but be filled with anticipation. Although he was convinced that there was no such thing as a heavenly wine in this world, but since the little demon dared to boast, even if the wine he brought wasn't as good as he claimed, it was still enough to make him look forward to it. In the morning, the originally dirty tavern had unexpectedly become clean and spotless. The snow-white wall cloth covered the surroundings and even the roof. It hung all the way to the ground. On the ground, there was an additional layer of light green carpet. The tables and stools that were missing arms and legs were all swept away. In their place were 2 long tables made of high-quality white jade. In addition, there were also several good-quality rosewood chairs arranged neatly. On the tables, there were 24 white jade wine cups stacked together in the shape of a steeple. There were 2 of them, and a total of 48 cups. At the corners of the walls hung a string of pearls the size of pigeon eggs. The pearls hung from the top to the bottom, emitting a gentle radiance that was reflected and refracted by the white jade tables and white jade wine glasses. The entire tavern was filled with gorgeous and dazzling colors. Anyone who entered this tavern would inevitably feel as if they had stepped into a dreamy paradise. That day, the middle-aged man excitedly stepped into the tavern. Suddenly, he cried out in surprise and withdrew his foot. He looked around suspiciously. That's right, this is the location of Old Song's Tavern. How did it suddenly become even cleaner and more luxurious than my prince's mansion? This place is no longer the shabby tavern of the past. It can even be said to be a paradise in heaven or a paradise on earth, right? Old Song hurriedly came over to greet the middle-aged man. Only then did the middle-aged man walk in hesitantly. As he looked around, he clicked his tongue in wonder. Old Song, you are too strange. Today is called a drinking competition, but in the end, isn't it just 2 cups of wine? Is there a need to make it so serious? This prince is so scared that he doesn't dare to come in. This Old Song knows his true identity. In front of him, there's no need to worry too much. You can't say that. Wine may be a small matter to others, but to me, it is the most important thing in the world. Moreover, I have a hunch that this drinking competition will be the kind of fight that I've always dreamed of. Or perhaps it will be the most precious memory of my life. Old Song solemnly said, Song Shang? So you are Song Shang, the Song Shang who toasted the king with a cup of wine, but sent the king with a body full of wounds. The prince was surprised. Then he smiled and said, But why are you not hiding your identity in front of me today? Is there any meaning in continuing to hide it? Song Shang smiled bitterly. 3 days ago, the black-robed man had already exposed his identity. So what was there to hide? Even if he continued to hide it, it was pointless. If it wasn't for today's drinking competition, Old Song would have closed the tavern 3 days ago and found another place to hide. It is said that Song Shang was a handsome and elegant man. He has a strange habit. Before killing someone, he must give them a cup of wine. He is known as the wine gentleman, sending a cup of wine to the king, urging the king to go to the Yellow Springs. But for what reason did Brother Song become like this? The prince asked with a smile. The past is unbearable. There is no point in mentioning it. Song Shang shook his head. His eyes were filled with bitterness. The prince tactfully didn't continue to ask. At his side, there was a 10-year-old boy. The boy was as cute as a porcelain doll. In front of strangers, the boy tried his best to maintain a calm and graceful appearance. But secretly, a small hand was tightly gripping the prince's clothes. This is my son. Yang Imo, the prince stroked the boy's head with a loving expression. His bones are good, a faint voice said. The prince and Song Shang turned their heads at the same time. They saw that the black-robed man had silently appeared on a chair. His expression was calm, as if he didn't see the earth-shattering change in the tavern. Thank you for your praise. With the prince's eyesight, he naturally knew that this black-robed man was not ordinary. He was most likely one of the legendary figures. Otherwise, the peerless assassin Song Shang wouldn't be so afraid of him. The prince didn't take his cold words to heart. He thought that if his son could catch the eye of this mysterious man, then it would be a great fortune for him. Who knew that the black-robed man would only glance at the prince's son. Then, he turned around indifferently, as if he had lost interest. The atmosphere in the tavern suddenly became silent. At present, one side of the drinking competition had arrived. The two judges had already arrived, but the other side was nowhere to be seen. Is it stage fright? The hitman, June, naturally wouldn't have stage fright. After all, why would he have stage fright in a competition that he was sure to win? However, June Dashao would never have thought that this little drinking competition would involve a grandmaster, a Tianxian expert, and a prince and an heir. And now, these people, who could shake the entire Jianghu with a stamp of their feet, were sitting there waiting for June Dashao's arrival. First class, not coming. Second class, still not coming. Still not coming. Still not coming. What a big show. The three men felt indignant at the same time. Even the black-robed man was no exception. These three men, no matter where they went, always had others waiting for them. Why had they ever waited for someone else? Unfortunately, they had run into June Moxie, who had made them wait for so long. After a long time, the black-robed man slightly raised his eyebrows. After 2 breaths, Old Song's face moved. By the time the prince heard the commotion, the palanquin had already arrived at the entrance of the alley. June Moxie got out of the palanquin at the entrance of the alley and instructed the others to wait there. He only brought 2 people with him, each holding a jug of wine, and leisurely walked in. It wasn't that he didn't want to sit in the palanquin, but the location of the pub was quite remote. The alley was even narrower than the palanquin, and if he were to force his way in, then the pedestrians on both sides would have no choice but to stand in the middle of the palanquin. Although he got out of the palanquin, June Dashao's swaying was even more exaggerated than when he was sitting in the palanquin. This wasn't because June Dashao was deliberately putting on airs. It was because this means of transportation was too bumpy. Even the roller coasters of his previous life were worse than this. So how could he not sway when he got out of the palanquin? June Mo lifted the curtain and walked in. Just like the prince, he immediately took a step back. His eyes were round, and he spoke after a while. Old Song, is today your wedding night? Old Song was dumbfounded. The prince burst into laughter. After looking around the room, June Moxie said with dissatisfaction, "Didn't we agree to meet in the afternoon? Why are you here so early?" As soon as these words came out, the 3 men glared at each other. Even the black-robed man, who had a good upbringing, couldn't help but stare at them. Chapter 162. June Mo laughed and didn't speak any more nonsense. He waved his hand, and the 2 warriors behind him carried a jug of wine and gently placed it on the table. Suddenly, the 3 of them focused their attention on the 2 jugs of wine. Only this much? Only 2 small jugs? The prince was a little disappointed. 2 jugs is too little. June Moxie rolled his eyes. 10,000 taels of silver for a jug. These 2 jugs are worth 20,000 taels of silver. I can't even drink for free. 10,000 taels of silver for a jug. Song Laos and snorted. I have never heard of a wine that is worth 10,000 taels of silver for a jug. Just the price alone is 100 or even 1,000 times more than the price of this Song's wine. This time, I've really broadened my horizons. His words were said with a hint of sarcasm in them. Frog at the bottom of a well. How can you know the vastness of the Milky Way? You are the one who has seen the world. June Moxie said without any trace of politeness. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and start. We still have things to do when we get back. I haven't even said that this wine is actually blended. My wine should be worth 10,000 taels of silver for a cup. The 3 of them saw this brat's overbearing attitude and couldn't help but get angry. The black-robed lady Lang Lang snorted and looked at the jug of wine. The aroma of the wine is only so. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is good. Who is good and who is bad? We will only know after tasting it. How can we know the quality of the wine before tasting it? June Moxie also snorted coldly. The 3 of them sat down angrily. The 2 judges had already made up their minds. If the 2 wines are about the same, or even if this brat's wine is slightly better, they will still give Song Laos and the victory. Let's see how arrogant this brat is. A small jug of wine costs 10,000 taels of silver. Why don't you just rob the treasury? Why is there a little girl here? June Moxie looked at little young Mo in surprise and praised. Not bad. Beautiful eyebrows and phoenix eyes. In the future, when you ask for my hand in marriage, you will definitely break the threshold. TSK, TSK. I'm a man. Little Yang Mo was so angry that he forgot his shyness and let go of the hem of his father's clothes. He clenched his fists tightly and glared fiercely at June Moxie with his black and white eyes. His voice was filled with Tong Rui's voice. Really? Why can't I tell? You don't even have an Adam's apple. Even the voice is a girl's. June Moxie shook his head and squinted at him. Why don't you take off your pants to prove it? This was obviously bullying. It would be strange if such a young child had an Adam's apple. I'm really a man. The little fellow clutched the waistband of his trousers tightly. His little face flushed red. He was very afraid that this shameless, strange uncle would come over and pull off his trousers. Let's say you are a man. June Moxie giggled. Come, little girl, watch me compete with your grandfather in drinking. He pointed at Wang Ye. I'm a man. The little guy screamed again. Besides, that's my father. The few of them laughed at the same time and rocked back and forth. June Moxie also laughed and rubbed his hair. Okay. Didn't I say that you are a man? Is that okay? And okay. The little fellow didn't notice the other meaning in June Moxie's words. He whispered in June Moxie's ear, if you still don't believe me, I'll take off my pants and show you my D*CK when there's no one around. June Mo Xie was left dumbstruck. He had been defeated. Although the little fellow spoke softly, which one of the people present didn't have a keen sense of hearing. Even if the little guy's voice had been 10 times softer, they would have still been able to hear him. So, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. June Mo Xie's teasing made everyone feel as if the distance between them had been shortened by a lot. June Moxie secretly smiled in his heart. Amusing a child. Although the hitman had lived 2 lives, he had never done such a thing before. But he was using this method to make everyone laugh and liven up the atmosphere. Then, after the drinking competition, wouldn't it be easier to talk about anything? However, no matter how strong an expert was, it would be useless to argue with a child. Looking at a mysterious master and a Tianxian master, June Moxie felt that he would be letting himself down if he didn't make use of this opportunity. Old Song carefully came out of the inner room, holding 2 jars of wine as if they were treasures. There was a thick layer of dust on top of these jars, and no one knew how long they had been there. In order to be fair, since you only brought 2 jars of wine, then I will also bring 2 jars. Old Song was somewhat proud of himself. These 2 jars of wine had been brewed when he was in the prime of his life. He had used the best fruits and spring water to brew these 2 jars of wine. This wine was brewed when I was 28 years old. Back then, I was in the prime of my life. I traveled from the snowy peaks to the north, to the glaciers to the south, to the drifting clouds to the east, and to the Punduan Mountains to the west. I spent 5 years collecting more than 30 types of exotic flowers and fruits, then mixed it with the essence of the 5 grains and water from the snowy peaks to brew it. Song Shang's hand rested on the jars of wine as he spoke with a sad expression on his face. After I brewed this wine, I suffered a series of major changes and was unable to recover. I hid in Tianxiang and never came out again. At that time, I was only able to brew these 2 jars of wine and was not willing to drink them. These 2 jars of wine can be regarded as the pinnacle of my life. As he said this, the prince and the black-robed man, Solitary Eagle, became even more interested. For 5 years, you searched all over the world just to brew a dozen jars of wine. Solitary Eagle shook his head. If it were me, I would never have been able to do it. Just this point alone makes this wine worth drinking. Worth drinking? Ha! Song Shang's smile was very strange, and there was a feeling of sadness in his heart. I have been wholeheartedly making this world's best wine for a few years, and the world has changed for me. Well said, the quality of the wine is indeed secondary. Just this persistence is worthy of praise. June Moxie applauded. However, persistence is not synonymous with success. In the end, the quality of the wine needs to be judged by the taster's objective opinion. The 3 glared at the same time. June Daxiao's words had offended all 3 of them. Persistence is not synonymous with success, and he was clearly saying that this wine was not the best wine. What objective opinion? Was he clearly saying that the judge would be biased? Solitary Eagle Lang Lang looked at him. Just a moment ago, he was somewhat pleasing to the eye, but now he suddenly felt that he was very annoying. He actually dared to disagree with this old man, and even dared to question this old man's judgment. He could not help but say coldly, "Young man, are you saying that persistence is not important? Let me ask you, since ancient times, when successful people whose deeds have been passed down for thousands of years, which one of them was not particularly persistent? Success isn't something that can be determined by just talking. Although persistence is important, it depends on whether persistence is worth it." June Moxie was not the slightest bit afraid, and said coldly, "Having confidence and being able to succeed, this is called admirable. However, if you know that there is no hope and still persist, then you are the #1 fool in the world." That's right. Since ancient times, all successful people have a special characteristic, and that is persistence. Once they have identified a goal, they will not look back, and they will work hard all the way and finally create their own world. And their stories will be passed down for generations. For example, in terms of conquering the mainland, our Tian Xiang's founding emperor, Yang Kaitian. In terms of Xian cultivation, such examples can be found everywhere. However, what Senior said just now was very reasonable. Success or failure was not something that could be determined by words alone. I believe that any famous Xian cultivation master does not rely on words alone. Xian cultivation master, oh? Do you know which Xian cultivation masters? Solitary Eagle had piqued his interest. There are 8 Xian cultivation masters in the world, and they are very famous. It would be hard not to know of them, right? The #1 is the elusive Supreme Eagle, Yun Bi Chun, who is accompanied by a level 9 Xian beast, and his cultivation has been rumored to be at the peak of Supreme Shun Xians. He is free and unfettered, but every time he appears in the world, something earth-shattering will happen. That's right. Solitary Eagle nodded slowly. The prince and Songshang heard the name Supreme Eagle, Yun Bi Chun, and their faces were filled with awe. Yun Bi Chun had indeed become a legend, an immortal existence. The second one is the great master Li Ju Tian. He does as he pleases, and does not distinguish between good and evil. He is vicious and merciless, but his cultivation is at the peak of Xian cultivation. No one can doubt this, and I believe that no one would dare to. The #3 is the mysterious master of the Silver Blizzard City, Han Fengshui. Jun Mo Xie had mentioned the Silver Blizzard City, and the solitary falcon's face had slightly twitched in response. The fourth is the Heaven's Equal Peaks freak, Mo Wentian. Jun Mo Xie saw his reaction, but continued to speak without batting an eyelid. This person is said to be from Tian Xiang. The #5 is Supreme Lei Wu Bei. The sixth is the Grand Master of the Shun Ci Empire, who is rumored to be Mo Wen Tian's archenemy, the life and death supremacy Shi Chang Shao. This person is currently in Tianxiang City. Jun Moxie smiled coldly. The #7 is Supreme Meng Hong Chun, who lives in seclusion in the Blue Sea. As for the #8, Jun Moxie smiled calmly. It's hard to say. What's so hard to say? Solitary Eagle raised his eyebrows and looked at Jun Moxie with a cold gaze. It's just a name. Is it hard to say? The #8 should be tied by 2 people in the eyes of the world. Jun Moxie smiled mysteriously. Solitary Eagle of the Grasslands and Feng Wan Yun of the Fierce Gale Swordsman have been fighting for the #8 position for half their lives and have yet to determine a winner. That's why I said that the #8 position will be shared between the 2 of them. What do you mean by no winner? That Feng Wan Yun was not even worth mentioning. It was just an undeserved reputation. What qualifications does he have to be compared with the divine eagle of the grasslands? Solitary Eagle snorted twice. Senior's words make sense. I heard that Solitary Eagle often goes to the great snowy mountains to practice his martial arts and fights with thousands of vultures. If this rumor is true, then the tenacity of the divine eagle of the grasslands is commendable. June Moxie's face was heavy, but there was a hint of worship in it. From this point of view, Solitary Eagle indeed has the qualifications to be above Feng Wanyan. He is worthy of being called the supreme master of the grasslands. Solitary Eagle couldn't help but be pleased with this affirmation and praised, "I didn't expect a kid like you to be able to name all 8 grandmasters. You have some knowledge." Chapter 163. The prince and Song Lao San were silently cursing in their hearts. Didn't I just say that this is something that anyone in this continent would know? How could it be said that he has some knowledge? Does this even need to be known? Besides, the solitary eagle of the savannah has been battling the snow mountain eagles for many years. But the fierce Gale swordsman, Feng Wanyan, has annihilated the prairie wolves many times, and his battle record is not inferior to that of the solitary eagle. How could this be an undeserved reputation? However, the two of them were also shrewd people. From the conversation between June Moxie and the solitary eagle, they could tell that something was amiss. When they thought of the 8 great grandmasters, how would they dare to raise any objections? Other than the 8 great grandmasters, there is also the supreme assassin, Chu Chihun. Speaking of this name, June Moxie couldn't help but be fascinated. Just what kind of outstanding assassin would be able to be called the supreme assassin? I wonder if his strength is stronger than the evil monarch in my previous life. I'm really curious. Thinking of this, June Moxie's heart was filled with a strong desire to fight. As the saying goes, a mountain cannot contain 2 tigers. In the same profession, there naturally cannot be 2 supreme assassins. In the profession of assassins, this is even more so. In June Moxie, the peerless evil monarch who occupied the throne of the world's #1 assassin in his previous life, would he be able to tolerate someone suppressing him? The answer is naturally no. At this moment, June Moxie suddenly had a faint feeling that sooner or later, he and the supreme assassin, Chu Chihun, would have a battle. This seemed to be a fated battle, and it was inevitable. Young man, although you're quite knowledgeable, but this old man still doesn't agree with what you've just said. The solitary falcon's tone had obviously softened a lot, even though he was still questioning him. This point is easy to explain. Why did I mention that the solitary eagle fought with thousands of vultures in the snowy mountains? That's the truth. June Moxie said with a sigh. As everyone knows, the vultures on the snowy peak are not ordinary vultures. They are real, mystical beasts. Although their level is slightly lower, the attack power of thousands of low-level mystical beasts is enough to cause a qualitative change. We all know that by practicing and fighting in that place, one can cultivate the Xian Qi within one's body and continuously grow. Just the bone-piercing cold is enough to push one's Xian Qi to progress step by step. Moreover, he had to deal with so many vultures at the same time. If he was able to emerge victorious in the end, then he would surely be able to greatly increase his combat experience. Moreover, you can observe the flight path of the vultures and their attacks, and comprehend your own moves from them. The solitary falcon nodded with a smile on his face as he listened to June Mo Xie's explanation. Yes, this is indeed a good idea. Looking at the expression on his face, June Mo Xie suddenly had the urge to spit on his face. Look at you, you're so proud of yourself. No matter what, you're still a great master of your generation. Can't you be a little more reserved? Everyone here can see that you are the solitary eagle, the god of the grassland eagle, and you are still pretending to be mysterious. Of course, that little rascal, Yang Mo, is an exception. June Moxie suddenly realized something. So, whether it was an ordinary person or an official, whether it was a gangster or a grandmaster, they all like to be flattered. Look at this guy in front of me. How comfortable is he being slapped by me? I wonder if this is the Charles de Gaulle of this world. Therefore, although the solitary eagle's practice process is extremely dangerous, and there is always the possibility of dying in the eagle's belly, it is a shortcut to practice martial arts. As the saying goes, fortune comes from danger. Solitary eagle is worthy of being a grandmaster if he can think of this. June Moxie resisted the urge to vomit in his heart. He praised enthusiastically and slapped the eagle without hesitation. Although this thing was a little disgusting, it was cheap and did not cost a penny. Solitary Eagle smiled with relief. He knew his own situation. Although his efforts were not recognized by others, it would be a lie to say that he was not happy to be praised like this today. But June Moxie stopped before going too far. He quickly changed the topic. Since this is a shortcut to success, there are so many smart people in the world. Don't you think others have not thought of this? In fact, I believe that Solitary Eagle is not the only one who has practiced martial arts on the snowy peak since ancient times. But only Solitary Eagle has become one of the 8 grandmasters. The others are unknown. What does this mean? Solitary Eagle was slapped all over. He blurted out, because those people are all dead. The solitary falcon couldn't help but sigh as he thought of the piles of bones buried on the snowy peak. However, he was feeling proud at the same time. Yes, what the senior said is very correct. June Moxie praised without restraint. A shortcut is never the same as a smooth road. Those people are all dead. Their bones are buried in the snowy peak. They have even become vultures' food. Not even their bones are left. Although they have found the right direction and chosen the right method, they are also extremely persistent. It can even be said that each of them is more persistent than Solitary Eagle, because they have been persistent until the moment of their own death. But the world only knows Solitary Eagle. Few people know who they are. That is why Solitary Eagle practicing martial arts on the snowy peak is a legend, not any of their names. There's only one reason. Because Solitary Eagle succeeded. They failed. It's that simple. June Moxie smiled. The anecdotes of the so-called successful people become inspirational stories, not because of the stories themselves, but because the protagonists of these stories have finally achieved success. That is why there are stories. But at the same time, people who have the same experience as them, or are even more persistent and hardworking than them, can also become stories. Their experiences are even more tragic and shocking. But because they failed in the end, they are buried. Everyone can have a story. Everyone can even become a legend. But there must be a prerequisite. You must first succeed. Wealth is a kind of physical enjoyment, but poverty is a kind of spiritual enjoyment. The only difference is that only the rich who have worked hard from poverty are qualified to enjoy poverty. And the poverty of the poor is just suffering. June Moxie said so much in one breath. He felt a little thirsty. He grabbed the teapot and gulped down a big mouthful of tea. But no one felt that his action was rude. On the contrary, everyone had a thoughtful look on their faces as they slowly digested the deeper meaning of his words. In the end, even though Old Song worked hard, sacrificed a lot, and was persistent, his wine may be good in the eyes of ordinary people, but it may not be the best. June Moxie had finally returned to the topic of conversation. His speech had praised the solitary falcon, but it also ended up hammering Old Song's body. It could be said that June Moxie's big circle was extremely ingenious. When June Moxie first saw Solitary Eagle, he had already started to suspect his identity. June Moxie was able to confirm that Old Song's cultivation was at the Sky Xian level, but he was able to confirm that Old Song was at the middle level of Sky Xian. He then used the matter of the 8 great grandmasters to test the waters. When it came to the fight between Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyun, from Solitary Eagle's reaction, there was no longer any suspense. This person was Solitary Eagle. This was something that even the prince and Old Song could see. If June Moxie still couldn't see it, he might as well buy a piece of tofu and kill himself. The most wonderful thing was that the solitary falcon had been concealing his identity all along and hadn't revealed his identity at all. However, June Moxie had begun to flatter him even before he had revealed his identity, and this had made the solitary falcon very happy. If it was a Xianqi expert like Old Song who said these words, the effect would be far inferior to June Moxie's. This was because June Moxie's performance right now was that of a lousy character. Such a character was actually able to judge the outcome of the fight between Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyun in such a fair manner. If that was the case, then wouldn't the others have a better idea of the outcome? How could Solitary Eagle, who had never defeated Feng Wanyun in his entire life, and had always been in a draw, not feel happy. Looking at him, squinting his eyes, and nodding his head vigorously, it was enough to prove the power of June Moxie's words. The more I look at this brat, the more I find him pleasing to the eye. Just as you said, whether a wine is good or bad, we still have to taste it and not boast about it. Old Song was a little depressed. He took out his wine and recounted his experience, gaining the unanimous approval of the crowd. Not to mention, if they were to compete in drinking at that time, even if the taste of the wine was the same, but with his foreshadowing, the victory would definitely belong to him. As for this brat, not only was he late, the moment he came in, his words had already caused the heavens to be angry and the people to resent him. But after talking about all sorts of nonsense, he actually managed to change the direction of the wind. Although what he said did make some sense, on the surface, it seemed that the two of them did not mention competing in drinking. But in reality, the moment Old Song brought up the origin of his wine, the competition had already begun. And June Moxie's words were like a counterattack, completely destroying the slight advantage that Old Song had had. This was creating momentum, but at the same time, June Moxie was also pursuing the greatest benefit. This was the prairie eagle god, Solitary Eagle. In the current turbulent times in Tianxiang City, Solitary Eagle's attitude was enough to turn the situation around. Moreover, June Moxie intended to find out how to use the Xiandan from Solitary Eagle's mouth and slowly lay the foundation. Not bad, not bad. Wine tasting is the most important thing right now. Who is better? Who is worse? Who is the winner? And who is the loser? We will know once we taste it. The prince laughed heartily. Compared to Old Song, he was relatively calm in the face of Solitary Eagle's prestige. After all, he was a member of the imperial family. Even though the Solitary Falcon's name had shaken the world, but he was in a different circle. So, he might admire him, but he didn't have much of feeling towards him. Even if he did feel something, there was nothing he could do. How could a person like Solitary Eagle be ordered around by any country's emperor? In other words, if the Solitary Falcon wanted to kill him, then it wouldn't matter if he was prepared or not, or even if he was prepared for it. So, it would be difficult for him to escape death. So, it would be better to let nature take its course and not deliberately offend him. Thinking this way, he naturally calmed down. Yes, persistence does not necessarily guarantee success, but success is bound to be persistent. The Solitary Falcon closed his eyes and pondered for a long time. Then, he slowly said these words with a sigh. After listening to your words, I realize that it's completely unnecessary to admire a person because of something. June Moxie was a little surprised. He didn't think that his words would make this Solitary Eagle so obstinate and self-opinionated. Even though he was thinking this in his heart, he still said, "Yes, we only need to be clear about our goals and move forward step by step. As for whether our predecessors fell and whether our descendants can keep up, we don't need to worry about it. Because what we are most concerned about is whether we can climb to the peak and nothing else." Well said. Solitary Eagle laughed. What we are most concerned about is whether we can climb to the peak and nothing else. Just for this one sentence, I'm willing to float a big white wine. June Moxie laughed and gestured for Old Song's wine to be tasted first. This action caused the prince and the others to be startled. First impressions are the most important thing when tasting wine and food. A person's intuition, especially in this kind of intense competition, is even more important. If two wines with the same taste and ingredients were to compete, then the one who drank it first would definitely win. Could it be that he was really that confident? Everyone looked at June Moxie, and a big question mark rose in their hearts. Old Song did not hesitate, and with a wave of his hand, a faint blue light flashed, and 4 wine cups fell at the same time, quietly placed in front of everyone. This skill was like the floating clouds and flowing water, extremely natural and unrestrained, causing the little Yang Mo's big eyes to be filled with worship. The mud seal was opened, and the rich wine fragrance instantly filled the air. The prince and Solitary Eagle couldn't help but close their eyes and take a deep breath. These two were wine lovers and also people who had tasted the world's best wine. There was nothing they could do about it. One was a prince of a country, and the other was a grandmaster. If they wanted to drink, what kind of wine couldn't they drink? Before tasting wine, taste the fragrance. It really is a top-quality wine. The solitary falcon said faintly. You're indeed worthy of being called the grandmaster of wine. You've spent many years on this wine, and just the smell of it is enough to make people feel relaxed and happy. Among all the wines I've tasted, there are at most 2 or 3 that can compare. June Moxie frowned. Although this wine's fragrance was mellow, it was too strong. It was like a high-grade perfume. If a little bit was sprinkled on the body, it would be enough to attract people's imagination and make them appear noble and elegant. But if a whole bottle was sprinkled on the body, it would be pungent and disgusting, and it would become cliché. Song Shang held up the wine jar with both hands, his expression solemn, and his face filled with a sacred expression. A blue light flashed, and mysterious energy passed through the bottom of the jar. Under the stimulation, a bright arrow of wine flew out, falling straight into a white jade wine cup, filling it to the brim, and not a single drop spilled out. Then came the second wine cup. All 4 cups were filled to the brim, and the arrow of wine seemed to never stop flowing, creating a gorgeous and fragrant rainbow in the air, but not a single drop spilled out of the cup. Chapter 164. Song Shang loved to compete in drinking. In his entire life, he had competed with other wine lovers dozens of times. Old Song was confident that he had tempered himself 1,000 times. Even when there were hundreds of people present at the same time and everyone was watching, Song Shang was always calm and composed, because he had absolute confidence in himself. My wine is definitely unrivaled in this world. No one can defeat me. But this time, Song Shang found himself feeling nervous. It was a kind of unintentional nervousness, an inexplicable nervousness, and his heart was filled with apprehension. The youth in front of him had an unremarkable appearance, and could even be said to have a sloppy look on his face, but he was actually giving off an invisible pressure. He squinted his eyes and looked at the 2 ordinary small jars of wine on the side. Could it be that there's really some exceptional wine in there? Or perhaps it could be said that this drinking competition was the smallest in history. But the scale of this drinking competition was unprecedented. Although there were only 2 judges, one of them was the younger brother of the emperor of Tianxiang Empire, and was worthy of the name of the emperor. And the other person was one of the few masters who stood at the peak of the Xian continent. Moreover, the only spectator was a crown prince of a prince's mansion. As for the stakes of this bet, it was unprecedented. Song Shang was not only betting his own reputation, but also his freedom for the rest of his life. If I lose, I'm willing to take him as my master. These words were borne out by a prince and a Shun Xian expert. Who would dare to let a Sky Xian expert, Song Shang, take an ordinary youngster as his master if it was an ordinary person? Who would dare to let a Sky Xian expert, Song Shang, take an ordinary youth as his master? What a ridiculous thing to do. This was a blasphemy against the dignity of the Tian Xian experts. Even before they could say anything, they would have already been torn to pieces. But in the face of these 2, who would dare to say no? Even if the emperors of the various empires were here, they would still have to give face to this. They might not give face to the prince, but who would dare to not give face to the solitary eagle, the god of grassland eagle? Even Yin Bichun, who was ranked first among the supreme Shun Xian, would have to think twice before offending the solitary eagle. Therefore, for Song Shang, intentionally or unintentionally, he had walked into a steep cliff. This battle was like riding a tiger, with their backs against the river. Good wine. The prince gently raised the wine cup and took a sip. He let the wine tumble in his mouth, touching every part of his mouth that could absorb the taste. When his mouth was full of fragrance, he swallowed it in one gulp. Gently closing his eyes, he carefully savored the wonderful feeling brought by this exquisite wine. Not bad indeed. Not only is the aroma of the wine alluring, the taste of the wine is even purer, and there is a leisurely feeling of intoxication. This old man has tasted many fine wines in the past, but none of them can compare to this wine. It is truly of the highest quality. Solitary Eagle downed the wine in one gulp. There was a trace of surprise in his sharp eagle eyes. No wonder Song Shang was so confident and dared to gamble so much. This wine was indeed not bad. All the wines that he had tasted before, whether it was the royal wine of the various kingdoms or the tribute wine of the grassland, were all overshadowed by this wine and could not be mentioned in the same breath. June Moxie smiled and gently shook the wine cup. The originally clear wine became blurred under the shake, and a few bubbles appeared on the surface of the wine. Looking closely, the originally clear wine had become slightly cloudy. It's still not professional enough. June Moxie shook his head and sighed. The impurities cannot be removed. This is the biggest taboo in wine brewing. Song Shang held his breath, and his eyes were wide open. His best work, which he had poured years of energy, effort, and blood into, actually received an unprofessional evaluation. Should he scold his kid for being too ignorant or too arrogant? After drinking 2 cups of wine each, the prince and Solitary Eagle's eyes simultaneously glanced at the 2 jars of wine that had yet to be finished. Their eyes showed that they were ready to eat. Anyone could see that once the competition was over, these 2 men would immediately start eating. Little brother, we should take a look at your wine. Haha, let's finish this quickly so that we can drink to our heart's content. Today, we were able to taste such good wine. This trip was truly not in vain. The prince smiled warmly. His words showed that he was very optimistic about Old Song's wine. From time to time, the corner of his eyes would glance at the 2 jars of wine that Song Shang was holding. The prince's meaning was very clear. I will directly say that Old Song's wine is good. If you, Solitary Eagle, say it again, you'll be 1 step behind me. After all, the wine is Old Song's and is not something that can be given to him for free. Otherwise, Solitary Eagle will shamelessly steal the wine and leave. If that happens, I won't be able to drink anymore. Old Song had said that these were the last 2 jars of wine. As for the winner between the 2, the result was already very clear. What else was there to say? The wine that Song Shang brought out today was much better than the wine that he had been selling before. One must know that the wine that he sold before was already very rare in this world, let alone today's wine. Solitary Eagle always wanted to maintain his identity as an expert. He couldn't be like the prince and ignore his face. Although he didn't say anything, he looked at June Moxie with eyes that conveyed the same meaning. It's still too early to say that. The winner hasn't been decided yet. How can we know whose wine is better? June Moxie said calmly. He bent over and picked up one of his jars. Then he slapped it down without a care in the world. Bang! The 3 men's eyes twitched. Even little Yang Mo, who didn't know what was going on, opened his eyes wide and his mouth wide. His face was filled with nervousness. Huh? The 3 men said at the same time. The smell was still the same. There wasn't any enticing aroma. Normally, when a mud seal was removed, the aroma of the wine should have gushed out. But why wasn't there any aroma? Could it be that this kid was really a wax spear with a silver appearance? The 3 men took a closer look and couldn't help but get angry. They saw that after the mud seal was removed by June Moxie, there was actually a thin layer of oiled paper that tightly wrapped around the mouth of the jar. It would be strange if there was any aroma. They watched as June Mo Xie unhurriedly removed the oiled paper bit by bit. This made the 3 of them blush to their ears. They wished that they could pull this brat down and tear off the oiled paper themselves to reveal the wine. This was too tantalizing. The oiled paper was finally removed, but there was still no aroma. Solitary Eagle and the other 2 men's eyes widened at the same time. There was actually a layer of Xian bee skin under the oiled paper. From the looks of it, it should be the skin of a 6th-level Xian beast. The Xian bee skin was naturally easier to handle. With a slight movement from all 4 sides, it was peeled off. But what happened next made the 3 of them have the urge to curse at the same time. Under the Xian bee skin, there was actually a thick piece of white orange wood pressing on the jar lid. White orange wood didn't have any smell, but it was able to isolate any aroma from leaking out. No wonder they couldn't smell the wine. But looking at the small jar, before they could even smell the aroma of the wine, it had actually shrunk to half its original size. This kid was too much, wasn't he? What was even more excessive was June Moxie actually stopped at this crucial moment. He stood up and slowly took 2 steps forward. He opened his arms and did 2 extreme chest expansion movements. He then took a deep breath and exhaled heavily. He put his hands on his hips and stretched his waist a few times. He shook his buttocks, then shook his head and twisted his neck. He interlaced his 10 fingers and exerted strength. Suddenly, the joints of his fingers made a series of popping sounds. Wang Yi, Song Shang, and Solitary Eagle were dumbfounded. In an instant, the 3 of them had the same impulse. Why don't you let me twist your neck? I'll definitely twist it for you. Little Yang Mo was still the most childish. He really wanted to ask this big brother if he was feeling uncomfortable. After posing for a while and doing a few movements, Jun Daxiao swayed his buttocks and took a catwalk. He then walked over and placed his hand on the white orange wood. He effortlessly took it down and threw it to the ground with a clang sound. In the midst of the silence, this sound was extremely loud and clear. It made the eyebrows of the 3 men, who had always boasted that they wouldn't bat an eyelid even in the face of a landslide, twitch at the same time. June Moxie's hand was already on the lid of the wine jar. At this moment, there was already a faint fragrance of wine wafting out. It made the 3 men's hearts itch unbearably. Hurry up and open it. Hurry up and open it. Get drunk before drinking. Open the jar, and the fragrance will spread 10 miles. F***CK me. The 3 men couldn't bear it anymore and cursed out loud. Even the self-proclaimed expert Solitary Eagle was no exception. No, it should be said that this man's reaction could be said to be the most intense. It was as if he was about to make a move to kill Jun Daxiao. This guy's level of pretentiousness had reached its limit. It was intolerable. However, the 3 men stopped cursing at the same time. Their anger instantly froze on their faces, because at this moment, Jun Moxie used an extremely direct method. With a smack, he directly smashed the lid of the wine jar away. Boom! An indescribable fragrance instantly filled the small room. It was as if a ruler had suddenly descended with the aura of a monarch descending upon the world. Or rather, it should be like the omnipresent moonlight at night. Without anyone noticing, it had already sprinkled its gentle radiance over every corner of the earth. This was a dreamlike, transcendent smell. When this fragrance wafted out, this place was no longer the human world, but a fairyland. No, even a fairyland would not have such a wonderful smell. The 3 of them moaned in pleasure at the same time. Suddenly, they felt as if they were floating in this intoxicating wine aroma. They kept on rising, and rising. Was this still wine? How could there be such a wine in this world that could bring one into a fairyland with just its fragrance? Sob, I am so touched. By the time the 3 of them came back to their senses, Jun and Mo Xie had already filled the 4 cups in front of him with good wine. The slightly amber-colored sake was poured into the white jade cups. Just by looking at the color, it had a kind of magical power that made people immersed in it and unable to extricate themselves. Before drinking, one is already drunk. 10 miles of fragrance. The prince forgot himself and stood up. Suddenly, his eyes were filled with hot tears. He used all his strength and roared with a trembling body. It's more than 10 li. Old Song held the wine cup with tears in his eyes, as if he had found a treasure. He looked at it carefully for a long time, unwilling to drink it. That was because he was really afraid. He wasn't afraid of losing this battle. He was afraid that the wine would only be fragrant and would lose its transcendent quality after drinking it. Chapter 165. The solitary falcon was worthy of being called a great master of the world. He was still as calm as ever, and his body was as still as a rock. However, his originally expressionless face had already begun to blush uncontrollably. His eyes flashed. He picked up the wine glass and slowly brought it to his mouth. After a moment of hesitation, he tilted his head back and drank it in one gulp. A clear and mellow feeling slid down his throat, and the solitary falcon silently circulated his qianqi. He clearly felt the wine flow into his stomach, and then he was surprised to find that there was still wine in his mouth. He swallowed once more, but found that he still hadn't drunk all the wine, so he swallowed again. Chinese fine wine, passed down among the people. Good wine. Even after 3 swallows, there would still be a lingering fragrance in the throat. The solitary falcon was in the middle of enjoying himself when he suddenly felt as if a raging fire had started to burn in his stomach. In fact, this fire had started to spread throughout his limbs and bones, and had even started to burn his blood vessels and meridians. In an instant, Solitary Eagle felt that his blood vessels were expanding. It was as if his hair was standing on end. He tried hard to exercise his qi so that he would not make a fool of himself in front of everyone. However, the burning heat was still flowing in his body. It was still burning, and it was still surging left and right. If there was an opponent here at this moment, Solitary Eagle even felt that he could challenge Yunbi Chun, who was ranked first in Shunxian. Good wine. This is the best wine in the world. Solitary Eagle tried hard to control his urge to roar. He tried hard to suppress himself. In the end, he couldn't control himself. It was as if he roared from his throat, from the depths of his heart. Although his voice was low, everyone could hear the excitement in it. This is the wine a man should drink. After a long while, he finally got up as if he was sleepwalking. He turned around and floated down. After a long time, he lowered his head and looked at the empty wine cup in his hand. Tears silently flowed down his cheeks. Today, I know that I have lived in vain for the past few decades. All of a sudden, he leaped up in an excited state. His arms danced in the air with great force. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't. After jumping around for a while, he returned to the table and sat down. He moaned, "Good wine." Song Shang's body trembled uncontrollably. He still held the wine glass in his hand, but he didn't drink it. However, when he saw His Highness and Solitary Eagle's reaction, he knew that he had lost. He lost without any suspense. But this time, especially at this moment, he was incomparably excited to lose, elated to lose. He had no regrets losing to a wine of higher quality. What's more, he was about to personally taste the true taste of this fine wine. At this moment, Song Shang didn't care about winning or losing anymore. He only wanted to taste the wine in his hand with great sincerity. Gulping it down in one gulp, Song Shang clearly felt that his soul was dancing and his mind was singing. Every inch of his muscles, every meridian, and every drop of blood in his body was trembling comfortably, moaning in satisfaction. After a long time, Song Shang's eyes were suddenly filled with tears. His throat started to sob. His tears fell into the white jade wine cup. He cried even more miserably. In the end, his body trembled, and he couldn't speak properly. He suddenly leaned on the table and bawled, I can drink such a good wine today. I have no regrets in this life to have the opportunity to taste such a good wine. Song Shang, can die without regrets." Old Song punched the table again and again, then punched his head again and again. He tore at his hair and wailed, "The first half of my life, I lived like a dog. Ugh!" Jun Mo Xie was flabbergasted. He couldn't help but feel his hair stand on end. Goosebumps covered his entire body. It's not that he hasn't seen people cry. It's not that he hasn't seen men cry. However, the man who was crying in front of him was enough to shock Jun Moxie. This was an old man who was over 50 years old. He was also an intermediate Tian Xian expert. Moreover, he was a famous assassin who made people tremble in fear. But now he was crying so sadly because of a cup of wine. He looked at the prince again. He was in a daze, as if he was suffering from epilepsy. Solitary Eagle's face was as red as a date, as if he had turned into a statue. Is it worth it? Isn't it just a cup of wine? Jun Moxie was puzzled. Hitman Jun had underestimated the power of China's fine wine. Ever since the Great brewed the first sorghum wine, it has undergone 5,000 years of precipitation and tempering. Countless people went crazy over the word wine, as if they were possessed. Wine is like a poem, like a painting, like an immortal, like a dream, like an intoxicated person, like a fog, like lightning. Generation after generation, the technology of winemaking has undergone countless changes. Jun Moxie had the complete technology, so he felt that winemaking was easy. However, he had neglected the fact that he was standing on the shoulders of countless giants of the Chinese civilization. The people who had participated in the wine revolution, from ancient times to modern times, were standing on each other's shoulders and were at least 3 times taller than Mount Everest. The winemaking process that Jun Dashao had mastered was the result of 5,000 years of tempering and tempering. It may seem simple, but the sages of the past had put in a lot of effort to complete this simple process. In this world that was not even comparable to the ancient times of China, he was suddenly able to taste modern China's wine. What kind of impact was this? This was simply indescribable. Old Song's Xianxi cultivation had long since reached the middle of the Tianxian realm and was considered to be one of the top experts in the world. This was a level that ordinary people would find difficult to reach, but he didn't pay much attention to it. In fact, he had almost reached the point where he loved nothing but wine. If he hadn't devoted almost all of his life's energy to wine, then his achievements in martial arts would have been far greater than this. Old Song had once lamented over his obsession with wine, but at the same time, he also felt gratified. He believed that he had reached the pinnacle of the way of wine, and had always been confident and conceited. But today, he had suddenly discovered a wine that was many times better than his own. In Old Song's heart, how could he just be shocked? At this moment, in his eyes, Jun Moxie wasn't just a mountain that he could look up to. He was simply incomparably tall, incomparably majestic. This young man was simply the incarnation of the god of wine. Heavens, there is actually such a good wine in this world. There is actually someone in this world who can brew such a good wine. If this person isn't the god of wine, then what is he? He had thoroughly defeated a person in his most prideful domain. This was tantamount to destroying Old Song's life's perseverance. His spiritual pillar had been destroyed. The small tavern was silent for a long time, and then the 4 people looked at each other. His Highness was the first to speak. Today's wine competition. His voice was still tinged with excitement. But before he could finish, Old Song interrupted him. I am ashamed. What wine competition is there to talk about? My wine, compared to this young master's wine, is just like what he said before, trash. I, Song Shang, have traveled all over the world, but I never knew that there was such a wine in this world. Song Shang's voice became more and more excited, louder and louder. I, Song Shang, am convinced. Then he stood up, and his eyes flickered with fanaticism. He arrived in front of Jun Mo Xie and suddenly bent his knees. He knelt down and heavily kowtowed to the ground. Master, please accept this disciple's worship. Jun Moxie hurriedly stood up. This, his Highness and Solitary Eagle, looked at each other in dismay. After a long time, Solitary Eagle said, If you agree to the bet, you must accept the loss. Song Shang has acknowledged this young man as his master. With this young man's wine-making skills, it is not a disgrace to him. Not to mention, it is not a disgrace. The hammer was the final word. Jun Moxie thought for a long time, and then finally smiled. Not bad. If that's the case, Old Song, you can get up. I will accept you as my disciple. What is this? Who said that there can't be a free lunch in the sky? Isn't this a free lunch from the sky? His Highness was treating this matter as a joke. He wanted to see how Old Song would go back on his words. He was a dignified Sky Xian expert and one of the top assassins in the world. How could he accept the former's joking wager as his master? Isn't this too much of a joke? Becoming the disciple of a master was a major event of one's life. In this day and age, the heaven, earth, monarch, and master are the 5 cardinal virtues of human relations. Although the word master is the last, it is the most authoritative of the 5, even more so than the monarch and monarch. A teacher for a day, a father for life. Parents shape one's body, but the master is the one who guides one's life. With Song Shang's status and identity, How could he accept a nameless youth as his master? His Highness obviously underestimated Old Song's obsession with wine. There is no seniority in learning, only those who have mastered it. In order to understand the true meaning of wine, what's the harm in accepting a master? To be honest, Jun Dashao was also quite surprised. He was just thinking if Old Song reneged on his words. Should he ridicule him a bit, or should he do him a favor, pretending to be magnanimous and let him off easily? He didn't expect that Old Song would, but young Master Jun was definitely not going to reject it pretentiously. There is a free fighter like Tian Xian. It would be a waste not to accept him. If he didn't accept him, then he would be a real fool. Even though this Tian Xian expert only wanted to learn wine making from him, even though this Tian Xian expert is very mysterious, and even though this Tian Xian expert can't be trusted, and even though this Tian Xian expert, who cares so much? As long as you become my subordinate, you won't be able to run away. Jun Mo Xie was very excited. He suddenly realized that he was now a teacher, so he should have the obligation to educate his disciple. The young Master Jun was fully deserving of the title of Soul Engineer in a split second. In fact, he felt that it was his duty to educate his disciple. I say, Old Song, do you know why you lost? Jun Moxie wanted to stroke his beard in order to make himself look like a person of virtue and prestige, but halfway through, he remembered that although he will definitely have it in the future, he doesn't have it right now. So he put down his hand and pretended to pat the dust off his leg. Chapter 166. Master's wine is a heavenly wine, a celestial wine. Unparalleled, this disciple's cultivation is insignificant. Naturally, I will lose, and I will concede defeat. Song Shang's tone was full of respect. It's still the same saying, learning doesn't matter before or after. The accomplished is the teacher. In the field of winemaking, the other party's achievements are indeed much higher than his own. Song Shang didn't feel the slightest shameful that he acknowledged this youth as his master. On the contrary, he felt very honored, very excited, and even very excited. You could have gone further, and you have indeed paid a lot for wine. But you are wrong. You are wrong in that you stopped moving forward. Jun Moxie was not polite and said, you opened your mouth and said that the wine you brewed decades ago is your peak, the world's best wine. Why does it sound so imposing? But it's this one sentence that has blocked your own path forward, completely ruining the possibility of advancing further in your future. The moment you brewed these 2 jars of wine and stopped satisfied, you've already lost to yourself, lost to the self who boasted of being at the peak. When Song Shang heard this, it was as if he was suddenly enlightened, and cold sweat suddenly dripped down his forehead. Yes, ever since he brewed this batch of wine in the past, there has not been the slightest bit of improvement. Instead, every day he was complacent, thinking that no one in the world could surpass him. Who would have thought that he had already been defeated? Just like Xian Qi. If there's a person who thinks, I reached the Earth Xian realm 3 years ago, and the speed of advancement is unprecedented, advancing to the Tian Xian realm is only a matter of time. Then this person may not be able to break through the Tian Xian realm in his lifetime and reach a higher realm. But Xian Qi is related to the life of yourself and your family. There is pressure, so you do not slack off in the slightest. Although the advancement is slow, you can continue to advance. But winemaking is different. You are not persistent enough. Otherwise, even if you lose today's competition, you won't lose so powerlessly. Jun Moxie said sincerely, so be persistent. Song Shang accepted his master's teachings wholeheartedly and lowered his head to accept the lesson. However, Solitary Eagle and Wang Yi started to look down on him. This idiot was so eloquent that persistence isn't the most important thing. But now, in the blink of an eye, he's overthrown my own conclusion. This kind of ability to turn hostile faster than flipping a book, it was really worth it. Their eyes fell on Jun Moxie's 2 jars of wine at the same time. Each of them gulped down a mouthful of saliva. Using the most ordinary ingredients to brew the best wine is the true way of brewing wine. Jun Moxie, said leisurely. Just like martial arts in the world, using the most ordinary moves to unleash the greatest power is the true pinnacle of martial arts. Hearing this, Solitary Eagle was stunned. Those who did not have a high enough level of Xian cultivation might not be able to understand this sentence. But for a master like Solitary Eagle, this sentence was enough to enlighten even the deaf. Just like throwing a punch, what kind of punch was the most powerful? That was an ordinary black tiger steel's heart, which could bring out the greatest strength of one's entire body. Even if one's fist was fancy and flowery, or if one could hit the enemy easily, the strength of this punch will be far inferior to a simple black tiger steel's heart. It could even be as different as heaven and earth. In a duel between experts, life and death could be decided in an instant. The difference of one move was the boundary between life and death. Black Tiger Steel's heart was undoubtedly a concentrated move, and it was the best among all the moves. However, there was always a prerequisite, and that was to hit the enemy. How could such a simple move hit the enemy, who was agile? Solitary Eagle seemed to feel that there was an inexplicable idea in his mind that was about to break free from its shackles and jump out. Once this idea became clear, Solitary Eagle was sure that he would improve, and it would be a huge improvement. But helplessly, he could not understand it no matter what he said. He could not help but frown and think hard. Jun Moxie's intentional or unintentional words had pushed this grandmaster to the brink of a breakthrough. By the time Solitary Eagle awoke from his deep thoughts, the prince could not wait any longer. "Little brother, this wine, how much do you have left? Is it—" "Oh, brother, don't ask about this first. I've said before that this wine costs 10,000 taels of silver per jar. What do you think? Is it worth it?" Jun Moxie did not bat an eyelid as he threw out his bait. "It's worth it." Before the prince could speak, Song Shang had already opened his mouth and said with a regretful tone, "Such a rare heavenly wine cannot be measured with gold and silver. That would only be a blasphemy against this wine. Not to mention 10,000 taels of silver, even 10,000 taels of gold per jar would be worth it." In his eyes, this wine was no longer wine, but a treasure of art. It was a priceless treasure. It could even be said that it was priceless. In my opinion, it's worth it. This wine is 100 times better than the wine that old Song San sold before. The prince answered Jun Moxie's question and sighed. "However, I'm afraid it won't be easy to sell it for 10,000 taels of silver per jar." How could it be easy? It was very difficult. The prince's words were already very subtle. Is it difficult? Since it's difficult, then I won't sell it at retail. I might as well sell it in limited quantities. Perhaps I can sell it for a good price. Jun Moxie smiled as he tactfully and subtly proposed his idea. The three of them fell silent. They were all outstanding people and instantly understood Jun Dashao's intention. They couldn't help but think to themselves, "Good idea. If it's an auction, when will it start? And where will it be held?" The prince asked impatiently. This was what he was most concerned about. "That's right. Where can I buy such a fine wine?" The price was secondary. Old Song, Sam will naturally know about this when the time comes. Song Shang will participate in the auction of my wine. Jun Moxie might not trust Song Shang in other matters, but when it came to selling wine, he was 100% confident. Song Shang could betray anyone, but he would never betray wine. Jun Moxie was very sure of this. "That's great." The prince clapped his hands excitedly. If there are any difficulties, this old man can also join in. In this Tianxiang city, there aren't many things that this old man can't do. It would be wonderful if he could join in and buy a favor, or if he could drink this wine often in the future. These were his true thoughts. In the end, this prince was also someone who loved wine. "Master, this is the current prince equivalent, Yang Huainong. He is also the only brother of the emperor of the Tianxiang Empire." The prince's words were very obvious, so Song Shang immediately introduced him. As the saying goes, the poor do not fight with the rich, and the common people do not fight with the officials. This was a prince, so it would be best not to offend him. Prince equivalent. Jun Moxie had already guessed that this guy's background was not small. but he had not expected that he would be the only prince of the Tianxiang Empire. He was slightly startled, but immediately calmed down. Sorry for not recognizing you. Everyone thought that he would be shocked and even pay his respects. After all, in the eyes of these three people, Jun Mo Xie was nothing more than a humble scholar. At most, he had a bit of pride and nothing more. But no matter how much pride he had, how could he not be excited when he saw the current prince, who could help him achieve meteoric success in a short period of time? It could even be considered proper etiquette to greet each other with great respect, learning both civil and military skills and selling them to the emperor. But this kid's eyes did not even waver, as if he did not see the prince's obvious hint of wanting to help him. Although his mouth said that he was sorry for being disrespectful, his words did not contain the slightest bit of respect. But they did not know that this youth in front of them, whether it was in his previous life or this life, did not care about a prince. Just a few days ago, he had publicly acted like a hooligan in front of the emperor's son. If not for the fact that this prince was pleasing to the eye, Jun Moxie was afraid that he would have flipped out as well. What's so great about a prince? If you want to drink my wine, then you have to follow the rules. Otherwise, there's no need to talk. If there is a need, I will be very happy to cooperate with you. Jun Moxie smiled faintly and said very politely. His tone was very obviously not enthusiastic. He would only cooperate if there was a need. If there was no need, that would be best. Prince equivalent Yang Huai known was not offended and laughed heartily. He squinted his eyes and said, although it is not convenient for this old man to personally appear, this old man will definitely not sit by and watch such a good wine be buried. Jun Moxie had clearly rejected him, but because of this, he became even more interested. How about this? This old man is willing to pay 1,000,000 taels of silver to buy a share and take 10% of the shares. Consider this old man a way out for my descendants. I hope that little brother will agree. Once these words were spoken, everyone present was shocked. First, they were shocked that Prince Equivalent would refer to himself as this old man and not this prince. He actually wanted to buy a share of the wine as a prince. Second, to use 1,000,000 taels of silver to only ask for 10% of the shares, it was obvious that he was very optimistic about the future of this wine. 10% was already 1,000,000 taels of silver. 100% would be 10,000,000 taels of silver, or even more. This old man is nearly 50 years old, and I only have one son and one daughter. The prince chuckled, but his smile was full of mockery. My daughter is all grown up, and if she can find a good husband, then her worries can be considered resolved. But this old man only has this one son, and I do not wish for him to follow in my footsteps. Therefore, I have no choice but to plan ahead and prepare for a rainy day. I hope that young master will give this old man some face. Everyone was silent. The previous emperor had 2 sons, and the older generation of the Tianxiang Empire knew about this matter. The crown Prince Yang Huaiyu and the prince equivalent Yang Huainon. Just from the 3 words, prince equivalent, one could see how much the previous emperor doted on his youngest son. Yang Huaiyu was full of ambition, great talent, and brilliant strategy. His military exploits were brilliant, and he had won the hearts of the imperial court. However, the prince equivalent Yang Huainon had always kept a low profile and never participated in political affairs. He lived his life like a hermit. This was because he knew that no matter how hard he worked, he would never be able to overshadow the genius of his brother, the crown prince. Competing in vain would only ruin himself. Therefore, he had basically withdrawn from the pursuit of power from the very beginning. In addition, he himself was not keen on power. After so many years of indifference, he had cultivated his mind and character, and was even less interested in the affairs of the imperial court. But now that the 3 princes were fighting for the throne, this prince, who had always been indifferent, had begun to plan for his children's future and even used an identity other than the imperial family to do this. There was a deep meaning behind all of this. Could it be that he did not think highly of any of his 3 nephews? Chapter 167. 1,000,000 taels of silver, 10% of the shares. June Moxie smiled enigmatically. Fine, I find you pleasing to the eye, so I'll let you take advantage of me. A prince, the younger brother of the emperor, offered 1,000,000 taels of silver only for 10% of the wine that he had yet to sell. And this guy actually felt that he had suffered a great loss. June Moxie smiled and lowered his head, saying to little Yang Mo, "Little girl, from now on, you are a shareholder of my wine. We are partners." "I'm really a man." The little fellow screamed, extremely angry, and almost wanted to bite him. We'll talk about this topic later. The matter between a man and a woman can be proven slowly. As for the auction, I will let Song Shang inform everyone. Now that I have something to do, I have to go home quickly. June Moxie wisely chose to leave quickly. A prince of the empire, using an identity other than the imperial family to find a way out for his son, this topic was not only unusually heavy, but also very sensitive. And since Prince Yang Huinong had said this, then he did not intend to hold back any of the rest of the words. But those who listened to his words could be involved in the vortex at any time. Even the strong Tian Xian, Song Shang was no exception. As for the currently weaker June Moxie, there was no need to mention, so naturally, he had to leave. Of course, this matter was nothing to the higher level of the Shan Xian, the supreme solitary eagle, because the supreme level of the existence of the imperial family. Although Prince Yang's action today was enough to shock most people in the world, it definitely did not include the level of the solitary eagle. In fact, Jun Dashao did not really care that much about this prince equivalence proposal. His partnership with this little child was at best just a casual promise. They saw each other pleasing to the eye, and at the critical moment, he would lend this child a hand or save his life for him. It was just a matter of lifting a finger. "Master, don't tell me you don't want me to accompany you?" Song Shang asked respectfully. Both his tone and his eyes were filled with desire. All paths lead to the same destination. The path of martial arts is vast and boundless, and so is the path of wine. You only know that this wine is already an immortal wine, supreme and unsurpassed. But how would you know that these are only 2 jars that I casually took out? To me, this wine is easy to drink, but it can't be considered a fine wine. June Moxie chuckled. "Song Shang, even though your identity has been exposed, are you really willing to leave?" June Moxie was right. Even though his identity had been exposed, Song Shang would never leave. How could such a heavenly wine be brewed? This had already become Song Shang's lifelong pursuit. Now that it was within his reach, how could Song Shang leave at this critical juncture? He wouldn't leave even if he was chopped into pieces. With that, June Moxie cupped his hands at Solitary Eagle, turned around, and was about to leave. "Wait," the Solitary Falcon shouted in a heavy tone. "Boy, you're done using me, and you're leaving without saying a word? You should know that it's not easy to owe me a debt. Old man, you should know that it's not easy to ask me for a debt. I've never seen anyone ask me for a debt, especially a debt without any proof." June Moxie looked at him with a smile. "Those who ask me for a debt often end up owing me more or making me owe them more. Old man, do you want to try?" "Bullsh asterisk T." Solitary Eagle scolded, but there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. "You're still too inexperienced to play tricks on me. No matter what, you must pay me back. All right, after today, we'll talk again if you can find me." June Moxie's eyes flashed, and he left with a big laugh. "If I can't find you, then I'll owe you." Ha! He knows this old man's identity, but he's still able to remain so calm. Moreover, his cultivation is still so low. This is the first person who has ever done this. The prince looked at Jun Mo Xie's departing figure with a look of praise in his eyes. This kid is not an ordinary person. What I asked of him today was not in vain. He guessed my identity and still treated me like this. He's also the first. The Solitary Falcon was also somewhat unhappy. You've already figured out the identities of the 3 of us, and yet you're still trying to keep it a shitty mystery? You're just pretending to walk away. You're really pretentious. By now, Solitary Eagle had already guessed that his identity must have been guessed by that kid. Otherwise, he wouldn't have said so many things to him. But strangely, Solitary Eagle did not feel angry. "I know he's trying to flatter me, but I just feel comfortable listening to him. What? Wait, what are you trying to do? The prince shot forward and blocked Song Shang's path, glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. You're that kid's disciple now. Didn't you hear what he said? He took out 2 jars of wine. Doesn't that mean that he can have as much wine as he wants? Besides, he's planning to auction it. So how much will he have? You've already climbed up the tree, and you're still interested in these 2 unsealed jars. This is too much. Old Song actually sneakily took the 2 jars of wine from June Moxie and tried to escape. Can he escape? What if he only has these 2 jars? You're just a judge, and I'm a contestant. What right do you have to take the wine? Song Shang glared at him and argued. In order to compete for the ownership of these 2 jars, his master could also be addressed as he. Only the judge has the right to drink. Do you have a problem with that? Solitary Eagle unceremoniously snatched the jars of wine from Song Shang's hands. Now that the competition is over, and you're the owner of the pub, hurry up and prepare a few side dishes to go with our wine. Under Solitary Eagle's pressure, Song Shang dared not say a word. He resentfully turned around and went back inside. Solitary Eagle and the prince looked at each other and smiled. At the same time, they grabbed their wine glasses. The prince couldn't help but sigh. It's good to have absolute power. All kinds of treachery and sophistry are laughable in the face of absolute power. Today, it's an eye-opener. In a corner far away from the pub, a masked woman dressed in black was standing there. Her clothes were fluttering in the wind, and behind her veil was a pair of bright and beautiful eyes. June Moxie, you've humiliated me. Today, you'll pay for it with your life. Don't even mention Junjian Tian backing you up. Even if the 8 great masters would back you up, you would still die tonight. Young miss, it's going to rain. You should go downstairs and take shelter. A masked man dressed in black quietly came up behind her and whispered, No, I want to see June Moxie's body turn into meat paste and his bones turn into ashes with my own eyes. Only then will I be able to vent the anger in my heart. The woman in black stood there motionlessly. Her voice was as cold as ice. June Moxie must return to the June family's residence to attend the family banquet before it gets dark. This information wasn't easy for us to obtain. We must firmly grasp this opportunity. Yes, the sky hadn't turned dark yet, but the dark clouds in the sky were getting thicker and thicker. The clouds seemed to be getting lower and lower, and the sky was getting darker and darker. Rays of silver light swam through the clouds, and the autumn wind whistled through the sky, bringing with it mournful whistling sounds. There were almost no pedestrians on the streets in such bad weather. The emptiness, coupled with the mournful whistling of the wind in the sky, made it seem like a ghost town. There was still an hour of free time before the time Jun Wui had set for himself to return home. Housekeeper? Family banquet? June Moxie was very interested in meeting his sister-in-law's family. So, this was the main reason why he had left the pub. Why does it feel so strange? June Moxie was sitting in the palanquin on his way back. He suddenly felt a little uneasy. He had just experienced a great victory and had even accepted a top expert from Tian Xian as his follower. So, why wasn't he excited at all? Instead, he felt a little absent-minded. There was something wrong with this situation. When was the last time I was flustered? It's really not right, Junimo Xie furrowed his brows as he thought of this. He subconsciously felt a chill run down his spine. He rarely had this kind of strange feeling, whether it was in this life or his previous life. But every time he had this feeling, it was always the eve of a great danger. And this uncomfortable feeling had already saved him from death several times. Could it be that there was another danger that could threaten his life approaching? Suddenly, June Moxie felt a chill all over his body and subconsciously fell into the palanquin. His whole body seemed to have turned into a piece of white paper, sticking to the inside of the palanquin. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Dense sounds of air breaking rang out without any warning, and the palanquin that was walking alone on the street from all directions crazily attacked. Sharp arrows, iron lotus seeds, flying knives. Countless hidden weapons were the first to attack the palanquin in the coming storm. A rain of hidden weapons that was denser than a downpour. With a bang, A short hammer connected to an iron chain directly smashed the roof of the palanquin. The 8 people accompanying June Moxie could be considered experts of the June family, and their reactions were extremely fast. All of the hidden weapons were aimed at June Moxie in the palanquin. Apart from 2 of them who were caught off guard and were injured, the others had already sensed that something was wrong in the blink of an eye. They casually pulled out their weapons, and bang, 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 bang sounds rang out, and the hidden weapons that were aimed at them fell to the ground. Protect the young master. With a loud roar, the 8 people surrounded the palanquin. Of the 2 who were injured, one had an arrow in his shoulder, and the other had a dart in his leg. Although their faces were deathly pale from the pain, they didn't even make a sound. After this unusually dense round of hidden weapons attack, it suddenly became quiet, and there was no other sound except for the whistling of the wind. June Moxie's heart sank. Assassins. Moreover, they are a well-trained, organized, and experienced group of assassins. The leader of the bodyguards hastily ordered, "Right now, the enemy is in the dark while we are in the light. We must break out of the encirclement. The 2 of you take care of the young master. If the situation is not good, immediately protect the young master and escape. The 2 of you will cover the rear, and the 4 of us will provide support in the middle. We must ensure the young master's safety." Everyone solemnly accepted the order. There is no need to cover the rear. Let's all leave together. June Moxie's voice came from the palanquin. The enemy's manpower is clearly greater than ours. In the previous round of attack, there were at least dozens of arrows, darts, throwing knives, iron lotus seeds, sleeve arrows, flying hammers, circular blades, flying forks, rope darts. Moreover, their close and long-range coordination is excellent, and the intersecting of the upper and lower parts is also good. Against such an enemy, covering the rear is useless, and once our manpower is scattered, it will only further accelerate our defeat. The only way to survive is to go straight ahead. Junhu, take a look. Is there a turn, Tenjong ahead? Chapter 168. Jun Mo Sia knew that the enemy's main target was obviously him. The previous round of hidden weapons had been aimed at him while he was in the palanquin. Now that the upper half of the palanquin had disappeared, they were waiting to see how he would react. If he had been killed by the previous round of hidden weapons, then these people wouldn't even show their faces once they verified that he had been killed. Instead, they would immediately retreat. 10 feet ahead, there is a corner. After turning that corner is the road to the Jun family's residence. Junhu, the leader of the guards, immediately replied in a low voice. "Good. Now listen to my orders. No objections. Otherwise, you will be expelled from the Jun family, understand?" Jun Moxie's voice was extremely low, almost inaudible, but his tone was extremely strict. The 8 guards were startled, but understood that this was not the time to argue, and hastily nodded their heads. Jun Moxie could see that most of the hidden weapons were mixed with a golden luster, and there were also 5 or 6 of them with a bright blue xianqi, but what really surprised him was that there were 3 hidden weapons with a yellow xianqi. Who wants to kill me? Why would they send out such a luxurious lineup? Jun Moxie cursed in his heart. I'm afraid that the last time they tried to assassinate the princess, their lineup was not even half as strong as this one. Am I more popular than the princess now? Abandon the palanquin immediately and rush forward at full speed. Their target this time is me. Don't worry, I'll be fine. You go first. I can escape by myself. Jun Moxie calmly commanded. That won't do. We will not abandon the young master no matter what. This is our only duty. Didn't the young master say that we will live and die together? Why did he change his mind? Junhu shook his head, his eyes wide open. He never thought that Jun Moxie would give such an order. Nonsense. I'm asking you to work together. As long as I'm not dead, you will listen to me. Now obey my orders. Jun Moxie lowered his voice and patiently said, Moreover, from the attack just now, I can see that there's an Earth Xian expert among them, and it is very likely that there's more than one. If you stay, you won't be of any help. Instead, you'll become my burden. Only when all of you escape will it be easier for me to escape. Just do. as this young master says. Since that's the case, we'll wait for young master ahead. I hope we can attract more troops. June, who no longer hesitated, he made up his mind. If the young master is killed, then he and the others don't need to wait for the family law or military law. They could just cut their own throats. After exchanging greetings, the 8 figures suddenly burst forth and charged forward. I don't care who you are, and I don't care who ordered you. If you want to kill me, you must be prepared to be killed by me. June Moxie watched as the 8 guards pounced forward. His eyes were suddenly suffused with a kind of brilliance that had not been seen for a long time. He muttered, "Looks like today it is inevitable that I will have to eat meat again. Then let me start a massacre." Hee. June Moxie had an evil smile on his face. His body was lying flat in the palanquin, but it was like a snowflake placed in the hot summer sun, suddenly disappearing without a trace. The only thing left on the ground was an empty palanquin. This action surprised the assassins who were hiding in the shadows. They had been following June Moxie for several days. They had even bribed many of the street vendors in preparation for this moment. Moreover, they had obtained information from a reliable source about June Moxie's route today. They had already concluded that the person inside the palanquin must be that debauchee June Moxie. But why did these guards abandon the palanquin? Was it to attract our attention? However, this doesn't make sense. They didn't even look to see if the person inside the palanquin was dead or alive. How could there be such irresponsible guards in this world? Moreover, these guards are the June family's imperial guards who are famous for their fearlessness towards death. This is really strange. Could it be that there is no one inside the palanquin? That can't be right. I saw them carrying the palanquin a moment ago. From the strength of the palanquin, I can clearly see that there is someone inside. But there must be a reason why they abandoned the palanquin and ran away. The leader of the assassins thought for a moment and immediately ordered, "Team 2, stop these 8 people and kill them. Don't let a single one of them escape. Team 1, follow me to the palanquin and drag out that thief June." Immediately, a dozen or so figures appeared from all directions and chased after the 8 guards. In that direction, there were already a few people blocking the way of the guards breaking out of the encirclement. With a few swishing sounds, these shadows suddenly appeared around the palanquin from all 4 directions. They had sealed off any possible escape route for the people inside the palanquin. Their faces were covered with black masks, and their swords flashed. "Third young Master June inside the palanquin, you can come out now. Such a flawed plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain is useless." The leader of the assassins stood in front of the palanquin and spoke slowly in a cold voice. "You're still inside. I'm 100% sure of this. If June's son Xiao doesn't want to come out, then please forgive me for setting him on fire." The black-masked man's eyes revealed a perverted sense of pleasure. It seemed as if the thought of using fire to burn June Mo Xie to death was a kind of cruel delight. The leader of the assassins repeated his words twice, but there was still no response from the palanquin. A little further away, the men of the second team were already fighting with the 8 guards of the June family. Banging sounds could be heard continuously. In order to reduce the pressure on the young master's side, the 8 guards were fighting with all their might in order to attract more attention. On the other hand, although the men of the second team were valiant assassins, they were far stronger than the 8 guards. Moreover, the 8 guards weren't the target of this trip, so there was no need for them to fight with their lives on the line. Moreover, the experts of the second team were concentrated around the palanquin, so the 2 sides were evenly matched. Suddenly, a bang sound was heard in the middle of the fierce battle, and a rocket shot up into the sky. It's the June family's special distress signal. The leader of the assassins knew that if he delayed any longer, there would be an unforeseen event. He clenched his teeth, and without hesitation, he waved his hand and shouted fiercely, "Set the fire!" 5 or 6 torches were lit at the same time and thrown into the palanquin. The palanquin was made of cloth, bamboo, wood, and other materials in order to be light and comfortable, so it was easy to burn. The wind helped the fire burn, and in an instant, the fire raged. The black-masked man laughed heartily. It was as if he could already see June Moxie struggling and begging for mercy in the fire. But his laughter came to an abrupt end. The crackling sound of the burning was incessant, but there was no other sound in the fire. If there was a living person inside, or even a corpse, then the smell would be different. What's going on? Is that debauchee really not in the palanquin? With a wave of his hand, the two black-masked men on either side of him simultaneously shook their hands, and two long black ropes flew out from their hands like snakes and wrapped themselves around one side of the burning palanquin. With a tug, the palanquin, which was already on the verge of collapse, disintegrated into pieces. There was no one there. Li Jiwu, what's going on? A cold and delicate voice came from Lengling. A woman in black quietly stood up in the distance. Her figure was graceful, but her eyes were extremely cold. She seemed exceptionally disappointed. Oh no, I've been tricked. Li Jiwu's heart shook, and he was about to turn around when suddenly a silver bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, and the sound of a thunderclap rang out. The heavy rain was like the Milky Way bursting its banks and came crashing down. At this moment, the Jun family's 8 bodyguards were besieged by more than twice the number of assassins. Although they were fighting with all their might, the difference in strength between the two sides was still quite large. Moreover, fighting with all their might had consumed their Xian Qi, and they were gradually unable to hold on any longer. In a moment, several of the bodyguards were wounded, and their blood was flying everywhere. In fact, if they had chosen to break out of the encirclement, a few of them would have been able to escape. But these few men were determined to attract the enemy's attention and would fight to the death. If you don't leave now, then what are you waiting for? Along with these words, a ghostly figure suddenly appeared behind one of the assassins, and 2 slender white fingers abruptly pinched the man's Adam's apple. With a light squeeze, the assassin's eyes blurred with disbelief, and the knife in his hand trembled twice, and then he fell backwards. Because the figure's appearance was too strange, the other assassin didn't see the enemy's sneak attack at all. Seeing his companion suddenly fall for no reason, he couldn't help but ask in bewilderment, "What's wrong?" The two of them didn't know each other very well, so they reached out to support him. Just as their palms touched the body of their companion, the other 15 or 16 people suddenly shouted in alarm, "Watch out!" Too late. He only felt a cold sensation in his throat and heard a crack in his ears as if something had snapped. Then he was surprised to find that his eyes were actually looking at his own buttocks. What's going on? I was clearly looking forward. How could I see a fart? His thoughts ended here. A head drooped down, and his dead fish-like eyes were still looking at his own buttocks in disbelief. Dead. That person was really lucky. He didn't feel any pain even until death, and didn't use any external objects to look at his own buttocks. The first time was also the last time. However, he wasn't the only one who had this luck, because a flash of lightning and a clap of thunder, accompanied by heavy rain. Under the illumination of the lightning, almost everyone discovered an unbelievable and strange phenomenon. A fleeting figure suddenly appeared like a ghost in the midst of the 4 assassins' encirclement. No one discovered where he came from, and no one heard the sound he made when he appeared. Was it the deity's movement, or was it the phantom transformation? He was like a devil in a nightmare, seen with one's eyes, but completely unable to touch. And this devil was calmly harvesting their lives, but they couldn't resist and could only passively accept it. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.